Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to another great debate. Today, we've got the great map and mode debate. So, we've got a lot of topics to cover. Actually, we're going to be talking about maps, we're going to be talking about game modes, as the name might imply. But first, before I get into explaining some of the topics we'll be touching on, let me introduce my guests. So, I think we have to start with the unexplained image to my left here. So, on the top right for you, Andy. That is not the real Torbjorn. That is Andy. Andy, what's up?
How you doing? Yeah, I'm here in my Torb cosplay, as you can see. Very accurate. I spent a lot of time, a lot of cardboard for this, you know?
Some of you may not know, but the Tor voice actor has been changed, so he is now Irish, and this is now canon, so it cannot be changed. Uh, Below is Niandra. So Niandra, what's
Okay.
up? I'm so glad you could join as a
Hello.
late addition.
Yeah, I was brought in last minute. I don't have many notes. My notes are just 2 CP bad. That's all I've got prepared.
2 hours
I
on that
I think
alone.
that eerily resembles chat's notes, so that should be pretty good. And in the bottom left is my recently infrequent frequenter, Freedo. Freedo, how's it going, my friend?
All right, everyone. Glad to be back.
And those of you, well, I'm sure you will remember very fondly Fitzy from his last appearance on the Group Up podcast. There's even a command now, Fitzy, by the way, in my chat for Fitzy chart. And what's up, Fitzy? How's it doing?
Good. I wouldn't say I'm too strongly opinionated on maps, or balance and everything. So it'll be interesting to have a little different perspective, maybe. But yeah, glad to be back and chat it up.
Absolutely. I'm delighted you could join me. Thank you, all of you guys, for joining me. Now, how this is going to go, guys, we're going to start off talking about maps, and we're going to cover topics such as the much alluded 2CP. We'll talk about Paris and Horizon, like what the hell happened to them, where'd they go, how would we fix them if we would fix them. We've got elevators now that aren't RNG, so we might touch on that as well. We will talk about various game modes, such as the upcoming push. Andy, of course, here to provide us some expert insight into workshop modes and stuff like that as well. But before we dive into that, I do have to make two quick admin plugs, so apologies, guys. But first of all, the more observant amongst you may have noticed that right on the bottom left is a little icon for Gamivo. So shout out to them. They've recently tied up with me. So they're basically a website you can buy games from for some good discounts. You can use the code that Emily has kindly put in the chat, the link to get an extra discount. I used it to buy Hades, which Freedo was telling me about before the stream. I need to actually get a chance to play it, but it definitely works. Check it out. And the other plug is my Discord. They host pugs every week, Saturdays, every Saturday, most Fridays. They will be going on, in fact, after this stream as well. So if you want to pick up games with some cool peeps, then check it out. There's the link to the Discord. Now, we got a lot to cover, so I don't want to waste too much time. Let me get right into it, guys. My first topic is relatively straightforward and simple. What makes a good map? Now, you guys might have a favorite map that you might want to use as a reference, but just generally, let's start as a nice little touching point. What makes a good map? And is anyone eager to go first?
I'll go. My favorite map's Hollywood.
Ah.
Now, some people wouldn't like it, of course. Mainly second point with elevator RNG and stuff. I like it because it has a little variety. The first point, it's kind of like a 2CP-ish, but it's not terrible because it's kind of like point A of 2CP, right? So it's not. It's like the, you can full hold, but doesn't have a lot. And then second point, it's streets phase, but there's a lot of high ground, and you can kind of rotate your compositions based on what they have. You can run the double sniper, and if they lose momentum, it's tough to push through there. And then you can do dive. You can just ignore the high ground and just stay on, run over the bottom because the other team's on high ground. And then third point again, you're kind of running into the final push of, yeah, you can get it to the end, but people don't always get it to the end. And I guess King's Row is kind of like that as well, where again, you have the little variety of 2CP kind of start streets phase, but there's high ground, and then third point is tougher to push and kind of the final boss. So yeah, just a little variety through it, not the exact same thing over and over.
Yeah, that was
I
kind
would
of the
tend to
theme as you were
agree.
describing it. Go ahead, Freedo.
I feel like I'm in the minority, and we might be as well. But I actually think Hollywood's a better map than King's Row. But they both are fundamentally good and sort of the archetype of the perfect Overwatch map because There's the different phases. The reason why I like Hollywood a bit more is because, as you were saying with the streets phase, like the high ground is insane, but there's more cover to compensate for how good the high ground is. And of course, now with the elevators, which I wish they had bounce pads there, but different rant for a different time. So yeah, I agree with all the things you said. The other point that I would bring up is maybe a little bit different, is that I like maps that add to the pool of maps. So like it's okay, that's like the perfect singular map, but we have so many maps that it's okay for some of them to be a bit biased or, you know, overly
Yeah,
tuned in
yeah.
one direction, just because of the context of, well, you can mix it up, right? Like not every map should be Kings Row or Hollywood in terms of its like
Hmm.
nearly flawless design, in terms of its 3-phase structure.
Right.
And if you were to think about like Numbani first point is notorious for like you're gonna run dive a lot, just because of the high ground and the way that the first point is on the low ground. Whereas Kings Row, you're not going to like your go-to isn't necessarily going to be dive. You know, it's notoriously Ryan Zarya and whatever. So variety, but
Are you guys saying that maps should force certain compositions or should be open up to multiple ones?
They help, that's for sure. I mean, well, it helps when that's the case, and that's why I go for like the map pool argument, because
Yeah.
like, and we'll get to talking about this later, but like one thing that I think is kind of funny is that when you take maps like Paris and Horizon out of the pool, Orisa automatically just has less good options, because we could, you know, they're not great maps. They are.
I'm
the
fine with that.
Doctor
I'm
Discuss.
fine with that. I want to just let it be known, but carry on.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, you have a hero that has like a very singular type design, needs a very specific type of map, and if it's not
Right.
in the pool, then they, you know, just have less time to shine. Whereas right now, I don't know, don't want to get too deep into balance talk. We're supposed to stay on map and modes, but I can't stop myself. I think the game's pretty well balanced now for a lot of tiers of play, and you can see that through the maps like mattering a lot for like what's good where.
Yeah, I agree,
I
because
think
obviously,
that's generally agreed upon right now. In the call and in the viewership as well of the show.
I think
Not a controversial
so.
take, right?
No, I think most people in the community do feel like this is one of the best. I think Seagull just released a video as well, like saying that Overwatch was the best it's ever been, and I think that's a good way of a sort of litmus test, which is that ideally, Blizzard have often gone towards this model of everybody should be viable like all the time, and usually that just means one person ends up being super strong and you have to play them all the time, at least in the higher ranks. But yeah, now I feel like Pharah is viable in certain spots. Like Widowmaker isn't like super broken all the time or anything. Certain comps you
Top
might roll.
500, but
Except for yeah. Well, thank God I'm not there, right?
if you watch the Samito stream, as I do, being a good friend of his, nonstop, it's the Widowmaker complaints. But anyway, I
But
think it's
what-
only in top 500.
Yeah, I think so. But what about Niandra, Andy? Would you guys have any thoughts on sort of? Do you agree with the map pool, or do you prefer that all maps be kind of Kings Row and Hollywood-esque?
I actually like what you were saying, like the variety angle. Yeah, I didn't really have much to add on that.
Personally, I think what you're saying about the map metas, I think that's the most fun, where Overwatch has each map has its own meta to it, like Kings Row being Zarya Rein. I'm pretty bad with meta knowledge at the moment, but I think that's where the fun comes in, because there's no arguments at the start of the round saying like, oh, what are we going to run? Is there going to be just one, like you said, one specific character that's just amazing because everyone else is terrible? I think that's where the fun comes into it. That's where Kings Row, because it's kind of simple. Like I think Kings Row is actually a really simple map. Like there's not that many flanks. It's basically like the first point has some flanks, but the second point and last point is just tunnels, basically, if you think about it.
Kings Row,
fight-
you just gotta work your way around.
Well, for a Sombra, sure, but like everyone
Off
can
on
see you
there,
coming.
you pull off
If
whatever.
you're Tracer or Genji, you can pretty much be seen coming out of most of the second point and third point. And that's where
They're
I think
obvious.
just
There's
Yeah.
flank routes, but they're obvious, I think. Is what you're
exactly
saying.
that's what I'm trying to say. Is like they're way more obvious. Whereas other maps, you can like say Oasis, you can go all the way around the map, you won't be seen, you can get into their backline. Whereas Kings Row, being such a kind of simple map, forces the team to engage head on, and I think that's more fun for me, at least as a tank main. I get more enjoyment out of that. So
My only issue with that is that it can occasionally just be a little bit gimmicky. I think like Elios like all just boops come out and sometimes it's like, ugh, I don't want to fight boops, But for the most part, I do think it is kind of okay.
Yeah, I think there's also an element of meta bias in our perception of the maps as well. Because King's Row is a good example of a map that's almost always dominated by Ryan Zarya, and nobody really complains that it's almost like a lock Ryan Zarya map. But as we get on to talking about, when we can segue now into bad maps, like what makes a bad map, or quote unquote bad, unfun for the community, often that comes down to being forced to play a certain bunkery kind of comp. I think Paris is a good touching point to go to. So of course Paris has the other problem of this very narrow choke point, but the fact that you have to pretty much play bunker on that little high ground setup, I think, contributes to people's ire towards the map. Do you guys agree? Like, what do you think is it that makes Paris so hated? And then we can talk about Horizon as well.
I saw someone once describe Paris as point A doesn't have enough entrances while B has too many. And I'm
Yeah.
not sure if B has too many, but like I do agree about like the A aspect, and I think like that might be to do with it. But to be honest, that's kind of 2CP as a whole, right? Is that like attackers generally don't have many places they can attack from. Like Hanamura, for example, has like two, Anubis three, no, Anubis two. You know what I mean? But like, yeah, not that much. I don't know if that's like.
If you guys remember Eichenwald when it came out, Eichenwald just had that one bridge. And
Yes.
like basically Eichenwald would just be
Mhm.
you lose first point if you don't push past that, because you can just not get past it. That's kind of what I think Paris is right now. Paris is just that one choke. They should just, like, that bakery on
Yeah.
the right side if you're defending, just bust a window open or something, like throw an Omnic at that window like they did in the airport in Albany.
Yeah.
I think that would actually fix the first point like almost immediately.
That's actually a really good point. I remember, yeah, like one of the complaints of Eichenwald was that, and then it feels like they made the same mistake with Paris
Yeah,
despite
exactly.
changing Eichenwald's.
And like it's not a huge fix. It's not like you need to change the entire layout of the map. It's like make one more path for us to go through where we're not being shot at constantly. And it forces the defenders to take a bit more of a dynamic position versus just sitting there looking at the choke, spamming Orisa bullets.
Fitzy, do you agree with this?
So I'm gonna have a little different take.
Yeah,
As
it's
a
okay.
Please, that's what we're here for.
Mm.
So, as a Sombra player, playing against bunker compositions, you get EMP, break it, and they win a fight. So I never really had the disaster of Paris that people tended to talk about, which kind of is like, oh, okay, well, then just run a Sombra if they're running that. You're playing the counter heroes to what they're playing. And what if you use Symmetra to teleport to go and move past the choke and not have to worry about the choke? Which, this is these off meta heroes. Sombra's pretty good right now, but that people are kind of like, no, I want to play my McCree and Hanzo and break the choke, and it's like, well, they're running Bastion and they're sitting there behind a shield, so we can't really do that. So I think it's more of a little bit of people being stubborn and not trying things. Not to say that there can't be another doorway through, because yeah, having one choke sucks. But I feel like ultimately it runs into people just not being adaptive. Like they're just running their heads into, I played this on Hanamura, it should work here. I played this on King's Row, it should work here. Like if we're talking about maps bringing diversity and having variety in how the game's played and what you expect, you play King's Row, then you go and play Numbani, then you play Ilios, and then you have Paris. It's not like it's like Paris, 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 Paris. You don't have the exact same game every time. But anyways, that being said, first point again, I didn't really have too much of a problem with it because I am ready to be like, guys, let's get past this. We're gonna figure it out, not just like be pissed off and just leave the game because it's Paris. So
I do think there's a fair point there in that we did speak earlier about, well, the meta's in a good spot. Like, okay, a certain map you'll pick Pharah, a certain map you'll pick Widowmaker. But you're right in that people aren't so keen on picking more off meta heroes like Sombra and Symmetra. This is a complete tangent, but these feel like heroes that are like, you either really play them and you're almost one-tricking them, or you really main these heroes, or you never seem to have them as your flex pick, which is odd thinking about it now. But Freedo, I know you were nodding along as well. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think both the maps, because it's 2CP in nature, the main reason why the maps suffer is, I think, what Fitzy's kind of sort of alluding to is rants that me and you go on quite often, SVB, but the community is largely to blame with 2CP, but at the same time, it makes it hard to blame them because you only play it so much of the time, right? And
Mm.
the game mode itself kind of beats players down in terms of if you want to pick McCree, like Fitzy is saying, it's even totally different at his level of play versus like Platt, where players might just struggle to fight at the same time. Now, me as a tank player or support, is the roles I excel on. I love 2CP because if like what the map's testing for is can you guys group together properly and get through a choke, then you win. Then I'm like, oh, I can do that. Yeah, sure. And then I'm on defense and the enemy team's like walking McCree out of sync with the team. That like so much of 2CP to me is just players knowing how to sync and not wanting to, because you kind of don't have to do it as bad on other modes. Like it hurts you on other modes, but on 2CP it's like make or break most of winning the game. And that's why you get these two maps that got removed from the competitive pool being the worst offenders for this, because especially at lower ranks. I was always surprised with Horizon as well, because I loved Horizon as a map, but if you see it played, I would say below Masters, players really don't understand what their character can even accomplish on the map. Like if you play Ana or Zen on attack on HLC and go to the choke, like you almost can't even engage in the fight. And that's sort of the problem with, as much as I say I like the diversity of map design, it's a bit of a problem with how players approach the game and how much we're asking of them, really. So the benefit of having a wide meta is a lot of things involved. We have a lot of variety. The downside is I think the game's possibly the hardest it's ever been in terms of having to know what things you have to do in order to beat not just the comps you're going against and the heroes you're going against, but the map itself. So very complicated game. These are complaints that the Overwatch League, of course, is very vocal about whenever we're talking about, like, you know, limiting the hero pool. It's like, oh, we have to learn 1,000 new things in a week. Like it's impossible. Now I feel like the players kind of are under that a bit with the meta diversity. I suppose that's the downside to meta diversity, right?
Yeah, I think the key is there. Yeah, the 2CP. Well, we'll get to 2CP in a minute. But to quickly touch on that is that it's a mode that looks radically different, like more so than the other comps, depending on the skill of the players playing it. But and Niandra, I know you're eager to get to 2CP, the discussion, but I want to quickly touch while we're actually specifically talking about maps on Horizon, because Freedo, you mentioned that you really like it. Why do you think the community doesn't like it? And this is just for any of you guys. Why do you think the community doesn't like it, and how do you feel about that map in particular? Like these Horizon, and I was checking this before the stream. Horizon in Paris got taken out November last year, so it's about to be a year since they got taken out, and we no idea where they are, what's going on. So, how do you feel about Horizon, Andy or Niandra? Because I know you haven't spoken in a while.
No, I think Horizon is actually a good example of how the community can adjust itself. Like Fitzy, you were saying about how people aren't creative, but I swear, when Horizon was played, everyone took that Symmetra TP right onto the point.
Exactly.
Like literally everyone did it. So it is possible for people to get used to it. But I just like, where does that come from? Is it that people see it used in Overwatch League, or people see their streamers do it, or like I don't know. Where does a person go from I'm never going to pick Symmetra to we got to pick Symmetra to get to the point, otherwise this is a lost fight? I don't know where that comes from.
It's a little bit of both, I would say. I mean, you see somebody use it, you're like, you know what? We do usually suck at taking this point. Let's try to cheese them real quick. You do it and it's successful. And then you're like, well, that worked last time. Let's try it again. And so then it just turns into this, oh, I lost versus that. I should try that next time. And then it just slowly is just like, it clearly has success because people have used it. And I think we've all lost to the Symmetra TP. And it's just like, they just TP'd and we let them. And, it sucks. But at the same time, it's like, does it suck? Or is that just like, you have to work as a team because they're going to 6-man TP to the point and you need to all be ready.
Like, is it the map or is it the players sucking there?
No, I think you guys make really good points on that. Yeah. But one thing you do have to kind of keep in mind is that, like, in-game information with Overwatch has never been, like, super great. Like, if you want to look something up, you generally find it outside of the game rather than inside the game. And I wonder if that might have, like, hurt 2CP somewhat, because there's a whole bunch of stuff with, like, spawn timers, depending on if, like, there's more defenders or more attackers on point. And, like, I can't find that information in-game. So
Correct.
I don't know, maybe like an in-game index or something might help, because obviously I don't like 2CP, but I do agree that it does like require the most teamwork, and maybe that is why people do not like it as much. You know, simply because it's just harder than other game modes.
Yeah, I
Agreed.
think Blizzard actually seemingly very particular about not giving information. I think I'm baffled why. Fitzy, you have an idea?
I mean, I've been pushing for numbers for like forever.
Yeah, right.
Like years. I have been trying just like how much damage does Soldier Rocket do? What's the
Yeah.
cooldown? What's the range? Is there fall off? Like just you can have the basics. I
Yeah.
understand that's where they started, but clearly where they started and where we're at now is way different. Like
Yeah.
there's a pro scene. Why are there not numbers somewhere in the game that you could like, you know, you hit F1, it brings up the thing. Is there like another menu that's like, oh, what's the cooldown? What's the animation?
It doesn't even have the
time? What's
cooldown. That's the worst part. I'm like,
Like,
even if you don't want to give the numbers, give the cooldown.
Yeah. So I think that obviously the information is there. They just need to be able to display it. And you know, you could go even as far as like while you're in game seeing numbers that like, oh, I hit that Widowmaker for 72 or so, I don't know.
or like hit markers.
Not that I like that's not something that I really want or need. Because I mean, I generally know damage numbers, but like like out of game of just like what's the cast time. Oh, I see that like let's say okay, I'll give the example of hack cast time is 0.65 seconds and Roadhog reload time recently went from 0.6 seconds to 0.7 seconds. So you could look that up and be like, oh, I can do that right in between if I hit it perfectly. It's really hard, but you know, like looking at like how long does it take to reload? How I know that I can hack a tracer in her reload because it takes 1.5 seconds or whatever it is. I don't even know what it is. I honestly like I could say 1.5 seconds, but I'm not 100% certain. It might be something else. But you could look up all of those numbers and try to like brain it. I don't know. I'm just a numbers person, so I like thinking it out of like how to beat the certain strategies and certain heroes that are oppressive.
What we need is Kargi here to recreate it so you can kind of physically enact it like the Mercy Res.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a... Go ahead, Freedo.
Yeah, I very don't want to agree with, but first, the devil's advocate, I think the reason why we don't see things like this is a very intentional design choice by Blizzard to almost obfuscate how hardcore the game is in lots of ways, right? And that's more of an Overwatch 1 thing. I do assume that's going to change in Overwatch 2 with, you know, they want the people to be interested in the Pro League and all this. So like I think there is going to be a lot more depth added, but it goes in line with kind of what we were saying about 2CP as well, where they kind of don't want to flood your screen with stuff that good players could use. They want to try to like simplify it so that you just you focus on the almost like kinetic enjoyment of playing the game, right? You focus on the sounds and the characters and the charm of the game, and that's part of the whimsy of the Blizzard design effect where they're trying to kind of sculpt it down. Because if you compare to other games that do have a lot of that information spam, it's very alienating to new players. So I think that's what their intention is. But of course, I understand why we're saying the things that we have been saying. The thing about 2CP specifically, though, the thing that I think another area we talked about the chokes, but something that I think really trips players up, and you were talking about like extended respawns, right? Like the problem that I have with 2CP is that it, again, just like can I get my team through the choke? There's another test of do you know what to target when, right? Because high level players, they know this a lot better. And Fitzy, especially as a summer player, is really going to know this really well. But if you're winning a B cap, and they're all dead, okay, Wrecking Ball comes out and he's spinning. If you don't have a Sombra, it's a little bit harder. But like a lot of players don't know when to switch between capping the point to extend their respawns or going at the squishies that have these big abilities and ultimates coming back that can win the fight. And that's like the decision making on that's got to be perfect because especially at low ranks, but it happens at every rank. It gets difficult where like someone swaps to Doomfist, comes back, picks your healer with one ability. If you weren't already planning ahead of time to know you had to go get him before he comes back and kills your backline, then you're going to lose, right? And maybe you don't even get any progress. So it's always it's such a tough balancing act, which is the type of stuff I want to be able to do in the game, and I feel like I can excel at. But I think a lot of players just don't even really want to engage with all these things. So kind of argue with myself here, right? Like I agree with Fitzy, but I think the average player doesn't even want to have to be asked these questions really. Like they don't want the game, you know, the same thing with the chokes, the same the target priority, these complicated things. players don't really want to have to learn it, even though that's what the game's doing to them.
So are we saying then that in a way, and I guess we can shift right onto just talking about 2CP in general. Are we saying 2CP is kind of the most complicated and advanced mode in that sense? And are we saying as well that basically if we had more help for players, it might help them hate the mode less?
Probably.
I don't think you're
I'm-
going to change the players. They're, even if you give them all the information, they're still going to be like, I'm just playing this casually. And that's true. What 2CP is, if you're attacking B, you need to execute a very coordinated attack, focusing the correct targets cleanly. You can't just like, oh, I got a pick and I died. It doesn't matter. You're behind now because they respawn right there. You need to get an entry pick and go. Like, there's no time. Like, you got to something, whatever your game plan is, you have to have a general game plan together. You can't play solo. If you try to play solo, unless you're a Widowmaker getting 3 picks every fight, and like, even if you get those 3 picks, they throw 2 ults and you lose. Like, you have to get more picks after that. Like, it's not like, I got 3 picks, why are we losing? Well, we got grab dragon and we lost. Sorry, you're playing Widow and you have no ultimate to help us out.
Let it all out, Fitzy. Let it all out.
So yeah, well, no, because it is true. I think a lot of the player base gets upset because, you know, let's say you're defending on point A and one person dies. It's like, oh, well, we lost unless a miracle happens. Same thing on B. You're attacking, you lose one person. It's like, well, we might as well reset. And then someone gets staggered. And then someone throws an ult. And then someone switches. And then why are you switching? And then it just goes back and forth to like, we're not working together as a team. And that's the thing is you have to attack very collectively and have a plan collectively. I like how we keep going back to 2CP, by the way. Are we talking about Horizon? Is that what we're supposed to be doing?
We were, but we're very engaged in this now. So let's go down this train. What do you think is the solution then? Because what I'm hearing is, you know, it's 2CP isn't the problem necessarily. It's our lack of understanding of it. But at the same time, we've also acknowledged that Overwatch will not give us more in terms of resources or numbers or ways of like understanding this more easily. So what is the...
I think that rout's fighting uphill. Sorry to interrupt, but I think players just don't want to play it. Basically, like I think it's not a great.
Is
solo
it
team mode.
antithetical
It's a great team
to
mode.
Overwatch?
No, it's great Overwatch. I think it's some of the best Overwatch. It's just not great with randoms. That's it. Because like, if you again to the McCree or Zenyatta example on attack, like if you play those characters, it's just rough for you on a lot of maps. And if you fight out of sync, that's why to lower ranked players, one great tip for 2CP, if you want to improve your ability to play it, either A, something that defends your team in these spots where they could die because dying is so adverse, or play faster characters that can catch up to your teammates trying to stagger, right? Because like as McCree, if you fight out of sync of your team because he's such a glass cannon type character, you might feed. Or if your team, this happens to me all the time, the team fight like, please stop going in. I was the last to die because you guys made the mistakes and died first. Now I'm out of sync with you and you're trying to beg for them to come back. Play a faster character that can get up with them because just so much of it is just syncing your engage.
Niandra, Andy, you guys have any thoughts?
Just thinking about logically there, like Fitzy, do you think 2CP at higher ranks is kind of universally hated, or are there people that really love it?
I love it. if I get a team that works together, again, kind of about the playing with randoms, and it's because you're out of sync. I like playing 2CP because there's nothing like a coordinated attack that just absolutely steamrolls them, and they're just like, we just capped that in one shot because we did something together and like caught them off guard.
Yeah, because
it's great for your heroes as well, Fitzy, right? Would you say?
Sombra and Mei are very good. Sombra, you know, you initiate with EMP, they don't even get a chance to use their ults if you do it correctly. But the thing is, you have to cleanly win that fight and don't take your time, because if they come back, then they win with ults. So it's still about doing it cleanly and team coordination. But you know, they don't get a chance with that, and then Mei, you can wall off the spawn and they can't even come back again. So
I wonder
that my hero pool is very good against those.
I wonder if adding like a rank restriction to 2CP, where it's only like Diamond or Masters Plus, if the issue with 2CP is that your teammates aren't skilled enough or aren't coordinated enough, surely at some rank that stops being an issue.
I think the
get
Or
problem
if
there is you
growing.
would run into like
Inherently so bad that
It happens at every rank though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
'Cause,
yeah,
like
but then surely the issue is not with people's coordination and people's knowledge, it's with the mode itself. Because if it was
no,
that
it's
players were
definitely people's coordination.
right, but isn't that kind of an issue with the mode that it requires a level of coordination that we can't get in Overwatch rank? This is the kind of disconnect between pro and high level Overwatch versus everyone's everyday experience that is really hard to balance around.
I mean, you can get it. It's the fact of people being stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
the
So
other
it goes back
mode's
to
less
that.
punishing. Like they still matter as well. It's just like you don't lose the whole game because you messed up one like out of sync thing. Like there's still ways to to sort of
I
like cumulatively build up things. Whereas Assault, you have to path together as a team every time. On other modes, there's like more leeway for expression of where you're going to play.
I think that's the crux of it in a way. Why this community hates 2CP so disproportionately as well is that you can end up being in a game where you lose 2 fights and you lose the round and potentially the game. And I feel like all the things that we've said are true about, well, if you're playing properly then that's good. But I think the most frustrating thing for ranked players is like, oh well, we just did this one thing wrong and we completely lost. It's the most, I think, polarized between attacker and defender 2CP, where it's like, if you're attacking, you have to bash your head against the wall seemingly over and over and over. And as a defender, if you get it wrong once, it's like curtain call. So I think that might be part of it. But Niandra, do you have anything? Because I know
Sure.
you've pondered
I
this
think
for a
what you
long
guys
time.
what you guys have been saying, I think, is like really interesting. I think with Overwatch in general, there is kind of like a disconnect between casual players and non-casual players. For example, like there's Overwatch on the Switch. I don't know if you guys have played 2CP at 30
Top 500, by the way.
FPS. 30 FPS, no one's like it's terrible, obviously. But yeah, one thing I would actually love to know opinions on is I did some like research recently, and I learned that in the Overwatch League, the team that gets the first pick wins the fight around 70 to 90% of the time. And in 2CP, there's only 2 objectives. And I feel like 2CP is quite feast or famine. And like the 2 objective things kind of, I don't know, just makes the flaws of Overwatch more obvious. But like, I know that statistic wouldn't reflect like a ranked experience, but I also think a numbers advantage is worth a lot. So like, do you guys have any thoughts on that? Like, we're kind of talking about how attack can be frustrating, but defenders can't really once they start losing, it's hard for them to recover. So it's like both sides kind of get screwed at some points.
I'm confused
Yeah, I
by the
think
question. Yes,
Yeah.
I
GCP is
realized I just kind of
frustrating.
rambled off a bunch of bullet points
no,
there.
I'm not sure. If
I
that's
got what you mean
I-
about the
I've heard that
numbers
st-
advantage thing.
I've heard
Yeah.
that's not for control for sure. The numbers are like that. I'm not so sure if Assault is like that in the Overwatch League or not.
Generally, it's very high
know-
though, right? Either way.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
It is high.
it's not just high on 2CP. Like the team that gets the first pick on King's Row wins the fight just as often as like Hanamura. It's not that different. But I
Hmm.
feel like it's different on King's Row because you've then got a street and then another street.
Right.
Whereas on TCP you've got
Yeah.
1 point and then another point. Like, there's a lot less fights, which is also why you get those quick play matches that last under 2 minutes because attackers just kind of like steamrolls. It's kind of like the thing.
Yeah, again, I think in an attempt to make the most different mode to the others, 2CP also makes this very polarized, kind of what I was alluding to earlier, which is that to try and make it like this is where I think the problems with Paris and Horizon came in, because 2CP in a mode is like, well, the defenders can only afford to lose 1 fight, because if they lose 1 fight, they lose this entire point. So how do we make the advantage for defenders super strong? Okay, well, let's give them really oppressive map geography. Like, let's give them a high ground. In the case of like Horizon or even Hanamura B, it's like, let's give the defenders like all this high ground looking down the point, so that if the attackers just run on like idiots and they just spam them down from up there and they won't know what's coming. Or Horizon Point A is a great example of that. Or in the case of Paris, it's like, let's give this 1 choke so that it's really difficult for attackers to come through. And I think that is what probably frustrates the community a lot, where it's like they feel like they're being like the game is literally being rigged against them in a way, right? Like if you're an attacker, the whole geography of it is rigged against you until you break through once, and now the whole thing it flips on its head, where it's like, now as a defender you've got such a long spawn that the game is now rigged against you. So in this attempt to make a very like, well, this is really tactical, you really have to do this properly, the game kind of rigs all these elements against you that then makes it feel unfair when you lose, because we all know like the ranked experience is feeling powerless as 11 other people like do stuff around you. And so to add the mode to that equation, I think is part on top of everything else, all the valid points we've made, I think that's part of it as well. Whereas the other game modes are much more like, well, you can afford to lose a fight on the payload and come back later, like that's fine, you know. So there's forgiving in there.
I think
I mean,
less
you can
static is a good way to say it. Sorry.
less what?
Less static. The 2CP, the fights are always in the exact same places, so you could consider it static. Sorry.
No, that's
So,
my point.
so on the point of that though, we've let's say Kings Row or whatever. The cart could be anywhere. The fights can happen in various spots. Y'all know that. On Hanamura, there's a couple things that you could do differently, but it's generally very similar. And so you would think that players are like, oh, what worked last time? What worked last time we played this? Not even like earlier in that game, but like previous times you've played the map, what worked? And try to recreate that. But then you still have like the people just like playing McCree and not having a team game plan. So as much as it's static, like you would think that people know how to attack it better, right? Because it's the exact same scenario, just at different heroes, same attack path or whatever. So why haven't people figured out how to attack as a
No,
team?
that's completely
They have
valid.
gotten better though. I mean, it used to be even worse, if you can believe it, in terms of the community's grasp of these things. But I do think Blizzard almost gave them a pass in a way by taking it out of the map pool and only putting it quick play. So I don't know if
and
we're seeing the gains that you're discussing, because like Andy said, the sim strats did get adapted, right? To like, oh, this is the easiest way to do this.
Right.
So
But you still hear people go like, Hanamura, here we go. 2CP. Like people still get upset. It's like Hanamura's been in since the launch of the game. It's in the beta. And people are still like, how do we attack? I don't know. It's the same map. But as for Paris and Horizon, I think overall the community was kind of just these two maps, they suck. And Blizzard was just like, okay, whatever, fuck it, we're getting rid of them because we don't know what you guys want, and we know that no matter what we do, you're still going to hate 2CP because you hate the other 2CP maps. So it doesn't even matter if we change this. We're just going to try to please you guys, and that's what they did.
I don't think it's that they don't know what to do, by the way. I think it's that it's so hard to balance them because it's so feast and famine. If you push it, 1% more and it flips over to the attackers being favored in a fight, that means that the defenders are just going to have a terrible time. I think it's just really finicky to balance. It's that whole thing you were saying earlier, SVB, of how there's more leeway with the other modes, whereas if you under or overbalance 2CP, it will always feel terrible. You need to get it absolutely perfect, and as I think we all know, like that's really hard to achieve perfect balance in any game,
The other thing is that, people are very against draws. Very against draws.
I never get that.
Like,
people say, oh my god, we just wasted 20 minutes for a draw. What, you'd rather lose?
Well, also, I'm like, why do you play the game? It's like, if you didn't have fun in that 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's where, to me, and it's not always the case, sometimes like, oh, we should have won that, it sucks. But a draw is meaning that you're somewhat equally matched with your opponents. So how is that like, oh, that was such a bad game, we got a draw? Like, no, we both either equally sucked or equally played really good. But the problem with that, like you were saying about balancing, is, let's say there's a 70% chance for the attackers to win point A, but only a 30% chance for them to win point B. Then you're both going to get stuck after capping A and draw at B. So I don't know. It still comes down to the coordination of the teams. Should the people that win that 30% win the game, and then they were the better team. So I don't know. The problem is you get really long games. So yes, finding the balance. They could make it so, obviously A is easier to cap than B most of the time. Simply because of spawns. And so if you make it so A is easy enough to cap and then B is hard, the final boss, kind of like the Hollywood last point and kind of like the Kings Row last point, the difference there is you can't get a draw because you're pushing that last point and it's like the second point of 2CP, but there's like different distances if they didn't finish it all the way. So there's less chance for draws, less chance. Like you don't hear people complain about the 2CP of Hollywood, or the 2CP of the two. I say 2CP, but just like the respawns coming back,
The spawn
staggering,
advantage.
winning the fight again. You don't really hear people complaining about that a ton. I mean, they do.
The spawn
but
advantages
not
aren't
as
as
much
bad
as
though. To be
2CP.
fair, like the spawns aren't right next to the point though.
I
That's the
mean,
reason why I
King's
think
Row
it is.
comparative to the attackers, defenders.
It's close. Yeah, it's not Anubis though. I do like Anubis.
Right,
Don't get me wrong,
right.
but I'm just saying, like that's what people don't like. I think is when you have to win 10 team fights to win a tick or whatever. Like
It's not really team fights. It's like you win the team fight and then you win by cleanly killing people, not getting caught off guard by but there's pulse bomb both of our supports. Well, we lost the push.
it used to be worse, to be fair to Blizzard, right? Like stalls used to be way
Right.
worse. They've really attacked that section of 2CP. I had a different point. I thought it was interesting. We're talking about the like design options, and it kind of clues into what you two have just said. But like on Paris, we can even see it on our Torbjorn's webcam here. I thought it was kind of cool when Echo came out that she was a character that could fly over that rooftop, so that you have Pharah and Echo who are pretty good at getting over that, and that actually is like could have shaped that map if we let it stay a little bit longer. But there is a downside to like if perhaps opening up a new lane there would be better. But say if it was too big, then all of a sudden it goes the other way where the attackers are just flooding in, and it's like the defenders don't feel like they can stop it. So it is very boom or bust in that way. And the other thing I'd say is that I play a considerable percentage of my game time in quick play, and one thing, HLC in Paris, everybody leaves immediately.
Everyone
so
leaves.
it's hard to play it ever anyway. But I don't mind it. I don't mind 2CP as a mode at all in quick play. In fact, I think it plays best there because neither team's really like caring if they win too. Like they want to win, but they know the map's not even really designed. Like the competitive nature of the map needed all these other time bank restrictions and the numbers going up or down, and then it reduces and extends, and there's a lot of complicated rule sets for 2CP to actually play like a competitive mode. So when you play it in quick play, you kind of know that like, you know, you can almost forgive yourself for like, you know, letting them cap on defense or something, and because if we were playing the real mode, we could have had an attack, and mentally I don't think people mind it as much, although you know they do leave when it comes up, when they get the opportunity. So
is it all just coming back to that same idea that Fitzy mentioned earlier, like the stubbornness of the community? It's like we've kind of pointed out various things that could be done, that we, you know, you pointed out like Echo and Pharah could fly over. You know, Fitzy said, well, you could Sombra, you can Symmetra, you can even use the May wall strat where you walk in, your May walls up the choke, and you walk around. Like there's ways, but somehow the community just doesn't like. It goes back to that team element of like, in a way, it's that identity crisis. Somehow we always come back to whenever we're in a group up call. It's always like, there are ways to do it, but it requires you to be strategic and team and coordinated, like do teamwork. But the ranked experience for most people is a solo queue fest. And in a way, Overwatch has even been leaning into that. If you think about recent balance patches, which were like, okay, well, go double off tank, then I don't mind. Like, go deathmatch frag, pop off mode. So again, like, what's the solution? Like, is it like a philosophical problem that we have to address first? Of like, is this a game that mandates teamwork, and if you don't do it, you're punished, and therefore 2CP is like the crowning glory of that version of Overwatch because it's the most punishing map for when you don't do teamwork? Or is it incongruous with this other style of Overwatch, this sort of more FPS-y, you could call it Valorant and CSGO-y style, where it's like, no, yours, the individual, are the most powerful, and if you want to pop off, you pop off. Because that doesn't fit with 2CP. Like, that just won't work. Like, you go off on the solo, you're just going to die.
map vetoes, I think are there is some form of it. I believe it's publicly known. I hope I'm not leaking anything, but there is some map curation coming in Overwatch 2. So hopefully that helps alleviate it a bit. So me and Fitzy can play against each other on assaults, and people who hate it can stay away. Like that's what I'm hoping happens, because it's
and
not
then
so much.
honestly, you would get
I
people
like
to
it.
be
I
more
don't want
teamwork.
Right. I don't want teammates that don't want to playing it. Like I get matched with, you know, a one trick of some kind that just doesn't fit the map, and then you know you don't have options. It's not like Fitzy, where his best heroes are very flexible in this regard. So like all the strats you're talking about, like, oh, let's Maywall, oh, let's get behind them and flank, like that's right up Fitzy's wheelhouse, right? And I kind of feel the same way, where the heroes I want to be playing are about the goals of 2CP. So it doesn't hurt me, but I also don't blame people for wanting to do their own thing. That kind of is the crux of all of this, where not all of the ranked community are competitive players in terms of like wanting to, oh, you could beat this if you learn echo rollout for this map, and you could do that. Or Pharah, I think, is great with the conch blast. Like the whole strat relies on Pharah getting over Paris A and conch blasting the team off, and then you can fight. And right, people don't really want to engage with that aspect of the game. They want to play their heroes, which, to be fair to them, the game is hard and it's hard to learn a lot of heroes. So like, there's only so much you can ask of people anyway.
Niandra and Andy, I know you guys haven't gotten the chance to speak in a while, so do you have any sort of let's head towards concluding-ish thoughts on 2CP?
Oh, we're just getting started.
No, I think you guys make very good points. Like, obviously, I don't like 2CP, but I do absolutely recognize what you are saying in regards to like it being more teamwork and stuff. And yeah, I'll just keep that in mind in future.
No, I mean, go ahead. Like, tell us feel free to air your grievances. Like, you can tell us how you feel, like, in sense of like what you want from 2CP or want done.
I mean, as we were saying earlier, I feel like it's too feast or famine, and that like one side is always probably gonna just not enjoy it. I think the map veto idea is like really good. If I could veto out of it, that would be nice. Yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of shows. I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier. I think it just kind of like highlights the disconnect between casual players, non-casual players a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I think that's something we will touch on in the subsequent consequence. But Andy, Mr. Torbjorn, how do you feel on your home map behind you?
Yeah, no, it's great here. All these Torbjorns fighting. I saw one get stuck earlier, but no, I think it's like what a lot of you guys are talking about is not really to do with the maps. It's more to do with the players. It's to do with the like kind of like the social systems that exist within the game. I don't think ranked encourages team play. I don't think there are systems currently within the game to encourage team play. I think if Blizzard were wanting to encourage team play more, there would be things like guild systems or team-based SOR, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Or you wouldn't just be queuing into a solo fest nightmare where everyone's trying to just be slightly better than the worst person on the other team who's throwing the other team's game. And I really think that's I think it's again, it really doesn't sound like it's the map, it's the social issues of the actual game itself,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, concepts like dry pushing is, the game's been out for 4 years and it's not like super well talked about, even though it's like a very viable strat on 2CP. You guys were mentioning the sim stuff. I don't know.
And the thing is, it's not just like this isn't an unfixable thing. Other games have fixed these issues before. Like I play a bit of Rainbow Six, and there's a fair bit of team play in Rainbow Six involved. Granted, there's a lot of toxicity in Rainbow Six too because of that team play. But like, it's not an unfixable issue for Blizzard. There are systems out there that can encourage this sort of behavior. They just need to actually implement them in the first place.
What would you put in, Andy?
Personally, I would undo the. Here's one of the issues: is there's not enough of a player base at higher ranks for some of these systems. I would undo the. Was it 3 stacking you can do? Is it 2 stacking or 3 stacking?
I think you can only 2.
2 stack.
Yeah.
Only 2.
I think like if the highest level of play in ranked was 2 teams of 6v6 going up against each other, it would encourage it kind of would trickle down in terms of the people would see their favorite streamers playing at a high level. They would see those strats being used. They would see like a Symmetra TP or whatever being used to Paris choke or a May wall. They would learn from that, and it would sort of trickle down. But right now, because you can't even queue with more than 2 people, like you can't have that team play at the highest level unless you randomly get like a bunch of Overwatch League pros that are queued up together. So really, I think getting rid of that queue restriction, but then it goes into the other issues of there's not enough of a player pool at the moment, which hopefully maybe Overwatch 2 will fix. Maybe loads of people will come back to the game because of that. But yeah, I just think encouraging team play through not having restricted queues would help a lot.
Fitzy, how do you feel about that as someone who does play at that elo?
So I have a couple points. So first thing, just going back to the map bans real quick. If we're looking at other games that I've played StarCraft, I played Dota. StarCraft, there's 3 races, blah, blah, blah. There's the maps. There's very limited matchups in terms of that. So there are map bans, and like some map, you're just like, I really hate that map. I don't want to play it. And if you want to be a pro, yeah, you have to learn the maps. So it's that like competitive, but not like pro competitive level. And then the casuals can be like, aha, I hate that map, and you don't have to ever worry
But
about it.
even
ever.
the pros have vetoes. Even the pros have vetoes in certain tournaments in StarCraft.
Right. And just yeah. But still, there's a veto, a map, a ban.
No, yeah, I get your
system of
point.
some
I
sort.
get your point.
Dota, there's heroes you can ban. You don't want to play versus that certain strategy. That certain team has a really good strategy. I mean, I know we're talking about maps. I would love a hero ban system. I just don't want to play against X hero every single game. We'll move on. But to go to your point about removing the restriction, I think at that point, like the level that we're at of going from kind of just casually playing the ladder, even though I'm a very competitive player in terms of the ladder, I'm trying to win every game. I won't just like, I'll just throw whatever. Going into the 6v6 environment, yeah, like you just go into the scrims, you go into the pugs, you go into the whatever.
Right, but why can't that be the ladder though? Like, surely we would have a better ecosystem if the ladder was that scrim pug environment.
Yeah, I guess the problem there again is, yeah, it is the player base. Like, why would the scrims try to queue at the same time if you can just host a game and queue together like instantly? You don't have to queue; you can just start a game.
This is why a weekend tournament system works better, because the nature of what you're saying is that there actually isn't enough physical players playing at that level for that to make sense. So it just sort of comes down to who's playing at the time, and it's just really unbalanced. So that's why like a timed tournament is amazing, because then you get a lot of players to come on at the same time to play against each other to do what you're saying. Yeah, that's my concern. The truth is, I don't know if the general player base learns as much as you think from the higher player base, because the high level players aren't struggling with the things we're discussing. They already know all these, generally speaking, for the most part. They're much better at the problems that we're talking about. So I don't know if that like necessarily trickles down. Like the problem of the entire player base trying to aspire to the thing. The reason being is that a lot of them in top 500 already do all those things Fitzy was talking about, right? Like if you're already a pro, go into ranked, play with, Fitzy, not a pro, but plays with and against pros often, he's going to, through osmosis almost, pick up on what they're doing, or the meta they'll enforce, or the play styles, and those things do then permeate, which is part of the reason why Blizzard is so strict on not having a separate matchmaker like a Faceit or something. They want pros in the ranked system to intermingle with the rest of the player base. And if you have full teams versus, if I get one of those lobbies, Fitzy's in one of those lobbies, and they're then amplifying that intensity by like 10 or whatever it is, that it's like too much to handle. But I do agree that I wish the playing in grouping was a community thing. I think it's just separate from high level play. Like it's not, they're already largely doing a lot of those things.
Right.
Yeah,
I think kind of what you're saying
that's
there.
why having like the removed restrictions, I think it would honestly cause more problems. Like I was glad when they removed it, because as a solo queue player, I do play a lot by myself. Getting in those games where like, oh, we're with a three stack. Okay, if we don't, all three other people agree with what they're doing, they're just gonna shit on us. Like, why aren't we running this comp? God, you guys are throwing, and it just is a very toxic environment of like, we're the three stack, we control the game, get out of our game. Like, it's not necessarily about like the, oh yeah, we'll play a team. It's more like a, we three stacked, you're gonna listen to us. So you get, or four. Let's say you get four, then like the four players automatically win against the two, because they're gonna, ideally the four people are on a similar page. So like, hey, let's run Ryan Zarya and run. Hey, can you play an Anna? And it's like, no, I'm not gonna play Anna. Oh, this is terrible. We got. And it's like, you've already got the 4v2, and then it just creates this tension in this toxic environment.
And do you think then that the sort of like just chaos, do whatever you want atmosphere that we currently have, is that better?
I mean, it's not better, but for the people that want to play the 6v6 coordinated, they can do the scrims, they can do those already. Like, they've already being done, obviously. And so the ladder is almost this, it is more casual than the pro scene. And again, I'm still competitive by playing on the ladder. I'm still a competitive person, but I know that it's not always gonna be perfect. I know if I'm like, hey, can we get, oh, they've got X hero. Can we get this? And it's like, oh, they didn't respond to me. Oh, wait, they're not in voice chat. Yeah, it sucks, but I'm not going to be like, up in arms about it, because at the end of the day, people are just playing to have fun. And that's what the ladder is. And you see that where pros will come and, I'll get in a game with a pro player from Overwatch League and they're like, ah, we have this. And it's like, well, this isn't the Overwatch League. Sorry, bud. I mean, there's no point to get like that upset about it. And it's ideally everyone would be, super trying to change up their composition and working together. Obviously, I would love to work with people that wanted to play, attack 2CP together, but it doesn't happen all the times. That's what happens when you queue with random people.
This is like another philosophical thing we always get into, though, is different people have different expectations going into every game, right? And that's another thing you're managing on top of, this is the ostensibly the map and mode debate, but philosophically, some people queue up in a ladder game because they don't want to play quick play, but they want to still compete and have fun, but they don't want to super try hard either. And then other people are legit like, I want to six stack, I want to scrim, I want to go do exactly what I saw the gladiators do just now on stream or whatever. And getting all those people in the same lobby can sometimes lead to these frustrations, and they often result in some of these outcomes that we see, where someone is like, can we do this strategy, guys? And everyone's like, no, fuck you. Why would you even suggest that, you piece of shit? Or like, so...
I mean, if we take, experimental or PTR, and you're like, oh, Soldier 76 has these changes. You go on PTR, and then someone's running like goats. And you're like, what the hell's going on here? So it's like, what is your expectation? Oh, we're just going to, just chill in and play some Soldier, whatever. Like everyone expecting the Soldier to be in every game, right? But so, it kind of tests that expectation of, what do you expect going in that game? Are you trying to win? Yeah, but are you like really trying to win? Not really. And so ranked, and yeah, I'm sure pro players too is like, I'm trying to work on this hero. I'm going to go in ranked and play this hero and grind that hero, and nothing doesn't matter. I'm going to play that hero every day. Keep playing that hero because I need to work on that for pro seed and whatever. I don't know where I was going with this. Anyways, something about
so
no, I mean, expectation going into the game of like, yeah, you're trying to win, but there's different depending on like, what are you going into it for?
Yeah, there's expectations. I actually think that's where Freedo, your point of a weekend tournament, like that kind of fixes that in a way, because if you're going into a weekend tournament, you know exactly what you're going in for. You're going to win. You're going to compete. I know. I like that idea. I hadn't thought about that before. So
I'd be shocked if it doesn't come, because it's already in StarCraft. It just seems like such a natural progression. So I would almost bet that at some time in Overwatch 2's life that we do see them. Maybe another point that I wanted to bring up. The thing that I don't like is that stacking in ranked for not the high levels is so incredibly punishing. So much so that it might as well be disabled, in my opinion. You only do it in this separate tournament style that I'm talking about, because the problem I have is that the level of gameplay goes up tremendously for a few reasons. There's internal matchmaking biases against stacks anyway, which matter more at lower ranks because of the way player disparity and skill works. Like if you're already at the top, you can't pull higher. There's not much of a pool higher if you're already at the top, right, to play against you. But if you're in plat and trying to stack, the matchmaker really screws you. And even worse yet, a lot of people play on alts with friends in stack. So it's like the difficulty is exponentially harder, so much so that I feel like it's not accurate as a means of ranked. Like solo queue, all the complaints you're talking about are definitely there, but at least it's like a consistent measure of a player's performance over time. Whereas the stat queues are such a mess in Overwatch, so much so that like it's not much different than playing quick play. Like it's just like it's rough.
Yeah, so this leads me, as some of you might notice, I've changed the topic because I think this is something that people wanted me to bring up, and I think that we've pretty much touched on it. There seems to be a sort of gap in between what comp means to certain people and what quick play is supposed to provide in terms of a place to practice and have fun. So do we need some sort of in-between? This is what we've kind of danced around. We talked about Face It, we talked about a team queue. Do we need some sort of in-between? And I'd quickly like to ask Niandra first, because Niandra, you haven't had a chance to talk for a while. So on all the stuff that we've talked about, how do you feel?
I think you guys have made some like really, really good points. I think ultimately I just kind of hope that like with Overwatch 2 we get a bit more support for the ideas you guys have talked about, like in-game, tournament stuff. I think the idea of an unranked mode would actually be really, really interesting. I know Rainbow Six Siege has one. That being said, we do have competitive open queue that hasn't been mentioned and is almost like what we're referring to. Like, not many people take it seriously, but some do. I don't know if that could maybe fill the gap for now for some people.
Fitzy, you were laughing at that.
No, I mean it's different. I was just gonna say every time I've played it, it's just a cluster. Like, I don't know what I'm getting going on in that. It's like, all right, warm up game. Yeah, that was terrible. Let's go on. So yeah, I guess it kind of fills that gap. But the thing is, I don't know. You run into player-based problems.
Yeah. Like, one
Potentially.
problem, you can't force people to care is the problem, because if you remember, like, ages back, we had, like, the off-season between competitive seasons where you could do, like, unranked, quote-unquote, unranked competitive, and it was just quick play, you couldn't leave. Like, people would throw and just do whatever.
I also
So,
think
yeah.
that as much as we want Overwatch to be more team coordinated and all that, I also don't think some of these things I don't think that fixes some of the things we're talking about. Like, I host pugs, as I shouted out at the start of the video. I host pugs every Saturday, and even when you have 6 people in lobby who specifically signed up to play a game, we even do coach pugs where we sit there and we coach the players, and we'll talk to them in between the rounds, be like, guys, when the point unlocks, do this. They don't fucking do that shit. They don't do that shit. Like, it doesn't matter how much you tell people or how much you coordinate. There's the cluster, as Fitzy described it, will still occur because of I think the problem is a lot deeper, basically. It's just a lot deep. It's a lot more fundamental to the experience of Overwatch in what we alluded to right at the start, where there's just very, very few resources in the game itself. So you have to go out and spend hours and hours and hours getting someone else to help you practice what actually the pros do. The kind of strategies, the coordination, the concepts. And take that time when LFG first came out. That was like a beautiful halcyon week. When LFG came out, everybody's like, let's LFG, guys. Let's all find a 6-stack. And then what happened? Like 2 weeks later, everyone's like, no, the game's too hard. I don't want to play a 6-stack. I just want to play deathmatch where I can farm the guy who's always flanking, right? So as much as we are like, I want team play in Overwatch. I want it to be a more heavily team rewarding experience. It still doesn't solve the clusterfuck of like the majority of the issues that the player base face, because I think it's just fundamental to the experience of not understanding the game itself. That's my depressing thought of the day.
But I think that you're right in saying that a lot of people just want to get on and play deathmatch. Like, comp is kind of just like deathmatch, and then there's this vague objective there for them. And that causes a lot of the issues, is that people come in expecting team play, and then you have 2 or 3 people in your team that are just there to shoot things and get kills, and that's it. And I don't think you can fix that without something like a tournament system or without a separate queue. If it's just one queue, you will always have that issue. It doesn't matter what the map or the mode or anything is. It's always going to be the issue. If you have 2 people who have 2 different expectations in the same queue, as we were saying earlier, it's just always going to be an issue. So it's all about really what system Blizzard wants to put in to fix that issue in the first place.
There was a bright side with this. SVB, you said all your statements were negative or depressing. The benefit is that Overwatch as a game actually has more longevity in terms of player base than people give it credit for, because it isn't as punishing in these regards. So other games that are more competitive flop. You see it happen all the time. They try to push a lot of these things that we're asking Overwatch to like lean into a bit, but if you go too hard, then all of a sudden it's like no one wants to even play, because it's the barrier to entry becomes too large. So there's a balancing act.
That's fair. Thank you for being the bright silver lining there, Freedo. and the other aspect of it is that it also has room to grow. Like, I mean, kind of any game really does. Even the most hardcore games still discover stuff all the time. Again, StarCraft, a game very dear to my heart, RIP StarCraft 2. They still find stuff all the time. So this only just goes to show you how much more the player base can still learn and grow with Overwatch. There's still so many things we don't. We've raised our level from like just picking Bastion won't win you the game anymore, But we've got more room to keep adding and building on that, which is nice. But Niandra, Fitzy, you guys haven't spoken in a while. Any sort of thoughts you want to add on that?
No,
I mean,
I agree with.
I could
what
go
you guys
back to
said.
Hero Band, but that's all. I love talking about Hero Band. So.
I'm always happy for that. We do. That might be the slightly discussion of a different podcast, guys. I'll have to get you on, Fitzy. But okay, so we've talked about the current modes. What do we feel about future modes? And you kind of alluded to, Freedo, that there might be like a veto system coming in Overwatch 2. What we do know is coming in Overwatch 2 is push. So let me quickly explain push to my knowledge. Anyways, Freedo, you might even be better than me at explaining this. But to my knowledge, push essentially is a game mode where it's like a more dynamic payload map. Essentially, guys, think of it this way. There's two. In fact, I have visual aids that I brought up before that I had
tug
ready.
of war.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Fitzy just made me seem like an idiot because I didn't say it in one sentence. But there's this little blue barrier that you can see on screen now, and the red team have their own version of this barrier. And the robot that you see currently pushing the blue barrier is what the teams fight for control of. That is kind of like the payload. The robot is the only thing that can push this barrier along. And similar to how a payload works, when both teams have someone on it and is near in its presence, it is contested and it doesn't move. When only one team has a set of players on it, the robot starts to move in the direction of that or for that team, favoring that team. So if only the blue team are touching the bot right now, the bot will start pushing it towards the red team spawn. And the further it gets, the more distance comes up on the screen for the blue team, the same way you have in payload. If the red team then come in and wipe the blue team, they'll start to push their wall now back the other way. And basically it's who can get it further, or you can even get it right there to their spawn, although apparently that's very unlikely to happen. So that's push. Now, any thoughts from you guys on what to expect with push, what we want from push? Or if I fucked up any part of explaining?
I think this adds a variety of, kind of what I was saying about Hollywood and whatnot, of not necessarily 2CP, I guess. It's more of assault. It's like a mixture of like assault, or sorry, not assault, control and payload. So I think it's safe to say that a lot of people enjoy both of those. So combining together is, can be fine. And then at the end, like you said, not being able to push it to the end is kind of like a 2CP factor of, okay, we pushed it that far, but there's no draw. So running into that, not getting a draw again, so people don't have that, I wasted 20 minutes.
Unless neither team pushes it at all, then just both stuck there forever, which could happen in bronze, I suppose, but carry on.
No, but there's overtime, so someone's going to have control of it. Unless it's literally contested. I don't know. I'm sure somehow you could draw it. I mean, you can technically draw on Route 66.
Payload, yeah, you can,
yeah. But anyways, very, very, very unlikely to happen.
Yeah. Sorry, I was being facetious. Carry on.
Right.
I believe, I can't remember if this was in the mode, but I think in Splatoon, the way they deal with that, it's whichever team pushed it the farthest. I think.
Yeah, that's going to be how most teams win, because there's a timeout. There's a time limit.
Mm-hmm.
So when it reaches the time limit, whoever pushed it further wins.
Right, it's not where it ends up, is what I'm trying to say. Like,
yeah.
It isn't like you lose most of the game and then you just one lucky team fight and just get it a little bit on their side and win. Like,
I think it lasts for like 15. I don't know what the timer is. Let's say it's 15 minutes. It's like point A pushes it to first, and then it goes back, and then they push a little further.
Or you push it all the way.
Push a little further, and they push a little further. So it's like whoever pushed it at the furthest at the very end. I might be push it all the way. I don't know if that's a win condition.
Yeah, you can push it all the way.
I believe you can cap it fully. It's difficult.
You can,
though,
yeah.
Because it's right up on their spawn, so you will have the 2CP problem there.
So yeah, exactly. But again, it's going to be very unlikely to push it all the way. So there's going to be very unlikely to get a draw. That being said, there is like, if I remember, if they haven't changed it from BlizzCon, there were like checkpoints. So let's say there's like 2 checkpoints for each team. So like the bot like pushes it to this like little pillar thing on the ground, and then it like goes in the ground, like a, what are those called? I don't know. Anyways, imagine on the road where the thing that goes into the ground, whatever that's, so it like pushes it there and then goes in the ground. Let's say a team pushed it there and then they lost control and then it went the other way, pushed it, and then you could draw that way. I think maybe, I don't know. Anyways, it adds variety to another, and it's another mode. It's not 2CP, so it's got to be good. And then there's the different elements of it, of like the Hollywood, like the Kingsrow, like we were talking about, that you can do all the variety throughout the game. And maybe the thing that'll be interesting was changing the composition. And when do you decide? Because let's say you're defending and you're getting close to ults or whatever. I guess it's like payload. When do you decide to switch on payload of different like phases of the map? Because it doesn't necessarily have phases. I guess it'll
Well, yeah,
depend on the maps,
there's no
though.
defenders theoretically, right? It's like control in a sense, or King of the Hill, where both teams are always contesting theoretically.
When you hit a checkpoint, I would say that's probably the phase, because the guy stops and then they cap it in the same way that you open a door on hybrid or,
Right.
or payload. So that's the only breakup in between, really, to the.
But
you fluidly go back and forth in those, right? Because like you might go to their side, then your side again, and it can you'll see both sides of the map potentially.
Right. So I guess it'd be more like control, where at some point you're switching.
Yeah.
But you almost switch based on the map of the 3 different maps, not like, oh, we're switching because they capped that point and we're into this phase of the map.
Yeah, right. You're not like it's not like Hollywood Streets. We're gonna have high ground now for 4 minutes or whatever. Like, for all you're gonna go back into the other side of the map, right? And ideally, if you win, right, you're gonna push it back to the other side. So I think control is the best example, because you need characters that fluidly attack and defend. So oddly enough, at the time, I believe Goats was meta, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was, right? So it was like, this is a great Goats map, because everyone player on the objective, but luckily you can't do that anymore. So yeah, my experience with playing it is kind of when we were at BlizzCon, it was possibly the most unfair type of match you've ever seen, because it was me, Nathan, and Samito sitting down against some 10-year-olds who were like, oh, let's play the new map, and they just get spawn trapped for the whole game. So we didn't really test the mode. It was kind of difficult to see how it would play out. I'm actually getting more from this conversation, having Fitzy kind of explain the different variety of it.
When you capture those points, do the spawns move up as well, or do you just have one fixed spawn the whole time?
I think so.
I think there's 2 points. There's like 2 checkpoints for each side. It's been almost a year at this point. But I think once you capped the first checkpoint, you get a spawn, but I don't think the second one gives you it. So like the first, I don't know. Anyways, we'll find out. It moves spawns do move, but I don't know how. Like, I don't like. If you're on an assault, and like you cap A, the attacker's spawn changes, but the defender's spawn doesn't change. I think there's some of that of like both spawns change, and then the next one only the defenders or only the attackers change. I don't know.
Yeah,
because I'm thinking there, you're saying, Freedo, about how if you're pushed up to the if you've pushed it and they're defending essentially their spawn, it basically becomes like 2CP then.
Right.
But it now, for the defenders, it's not unfun, because you can push back and you can basically reverse sweep 2CP almost. Like, you can become the attackers when you're defending, which I think kind of gets rid of that really unfun thing of either staggering in a bunch in 2CP or where, yeah, I don't know. It's just, I think that's a new kind of like way to win a team fight, is basically being on defense in 2CP and then rolling the attackers and then forcing them back to be the defenders. I know. I think that's going to be.
It has a long way to push, though. If you're all the way in your spawn, it's a long way. Like maybe once a game.
I would compare it the most to Control, but like more like Payload in terms of duration. So like the way of who controls the map and how the engagements go is like Control, but Control, really, there's like 3 fights to win, or like a 4th sometimes, depending on how it goes, right? Like, just based on how the objective ticks up, as Fitzy's saying, push, it lasts forever, basically. Like, some of these games might go pretty long if there's a lot of overtime, depending on how they work the time and stuff. But it's sort of like Control in the way that the team fights go, but Payload in terms of, as you're saying, like, we get to the end of Route 66. It's the same thing here on Push. You just have the opportunity to push it all the way back to like Route 66 attackers A spawn, right? Like, that's how the map's going to flow.
Which I think is super satisfying, by the way. Like, I think that's, imagine doing that to a team. You're basically about to lose, and then you completely reverse sweep the entire game mode. I don't think does any other game mode really offer that.
I mean, 2CP, and you can like
You can do that.
like capped with 0 time left, and they had 4 minutes. Now they have 5 because we added a minute, and then you just win because of that.
Right, but it feels more active when you're pushing them back versus just defending well. You know, if you're like actively pushing them back, I think that's way more satisfying versus just you just did better on time and you get to defend better. You know.
No, but let's say you're on 2CP and one team got 1 minute or 0, and the other team got 4. So now it's like 5 minutes versus 1 minute, but then the 1 minute wins. Like that's the reverse sweep.
Yeah.
Or
like
on
you were
King of the
you
Hill.
defended really good, or whatever, or you I don't know. You attacked really good the next time because you only had 1 minute and you did it.
Or in King of the Hill, you can get 0 to 100, then then you can kind of be like 99 down and come back and win 100-0, 100-0, theoretically.
I think the difference there is to like pause between the rounds, whereas this is like way more active.
Yeah, sure.
Usually, backs to the wall, and then all of a sudden we get this burst of momentum versus round ends, then you swap up strategies.
No,
I can hear the whining now.
I like how what an optimistic dreamer you are, Andy, and envisioning that scenario, not the more likely, you guys all suck, I'm just sitting in spawn now, let's get this game over with quickly.
Just think of the other side. We almost pushed it all the way, and then
we
lost.
God,
yeah.
Yeah, the progressive tilting as the thing goes further and further. It's the progressive. How are we losing?
I will say something about the map is, at least the version that we played, I don't know how many maps they're going to make of this type. It was very like an S. The route of the payload was like an S, and so there was a lot of flanking, and like you weren't always just like getting pushed back. You were like you could walk in between and like turn into defenders while attacking, and different.
Probably the most flanks of any map, based on what.
Yeah,
what,
there was a lot.
There's just it's like playing a different game almost. Like how in Battlefield maybe is like the best example I can think of. Battlefield's the maps. There's houses and rooms, and the guys can be anywhere. It sort of plays. It's more like that, I would say, the Overwatch version anyway. The opposite of King's Row. We were like, King's Row flanks are obvious. It's the push map. I can't remember what it's called. On
Toronto, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was Toronto.
Lots and lots of flanks.
Yeah, actually, those of you on stream, you can see at the bottom, as Fitzy illustrated, there's a very S shape to the map there, and you can see there's lots of potential to come around buildings, etc., etc. Niandra, what do you feel about the push? We haven't really heard from you on the topic of push.
Honestly, I don't really have many opinions on it. I think it looks great. I feel like I'm so starved for new content that I would just take like a room with dev textures at this point. So yeah, it looks great. Do we know if the rooms are like solids or if you can like enter them? Because you were mentioning Battlefield there.
Not all of them, but there's more than normal in Overwatch, right? Like a normal Overwatch map, it's like you're in Hanamura. There's a lot of houses and shops, and there's like one you can go in, right? For real. But in the push map, there was quite a lot more. Like the maps are porous, basically. Like
there's lots of areas.
It's kind of like Rialto, if you could walk, like how there's lots of. You could walk in a lot of those buildings in Rialto, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, except for you can like walk through and think of it like even for both teams instead of like a defender's advantage or whatever.
There are areas on like 2CP that you don't really make use of. Like at the beginning of Volskaya Attack, you've got the hotel thing off to, I think, the right side. I feel like Push looks like you would make more use of areas like that than other maps potentially, which I think is really cool. So yeah, I think that looks neat.
It does sound like it's not going to be as hated as 2CP or anything. It sounds like it's going to be pretty liked by what we're saying about it and how it seems to be described. Like team comp wise, if you can.
I mean, if it's close to King of the Hill.
Yeah, if it's close to King of the Hill,
right?
I think it'll be fun, but also like a new, very difficult challenge because there's a lot of complexity in the map that if you're not prepared for, a thing's going to come out and just kill you instantly. Like it's not like people like King's Row, I think, because it's just very cut and dry. Walk forward. It's easy to play. It's like it's so easy to play with your team because there's only so many places they can be, right? Whereas with this, you're going to have to be contesting a lot of different angles or pivoting your awareness of what's going on quite fluidly. So. It'll be interesting. We'll have a bunch of new characters as well at that time. So who knows what new characters could take advantage of how open the map is.
I think people like that, like sort of chaos, though, it seems. I mean, Fitzy, I would say you would like that more as a Sombra player, being able to just run around the sort of chaos and hack people.
I'm fine with 2CP, so any map's fine. Like nothing's going to like. I hate it. But yeah, it has
Right,
it has
well-
a lot of potential for like high grounds and pincering in the team where you get a concave around them and collapse in. Potentially, obviously.
I'd imagine
teamwork.
tanking would be very difficult. Let's put it that way. Whereas
Yeah.
like tanking on King's Row, it's like there's corners everywhere. So I'd walk to this one. I'm here. I'm set. In this, it's like damage is going to hit you from everywhere. That's the way it's going to work. So yeah.
Wow, another way to incentivize tanking. Gotta love it. Well, since we're talking about multiple, objectives and multiple shits fighting on, let's segue over to domination or conquest mode. How do we feel that would work potentially in Overwatch? Since we're spitballing what might come in Overwatch 2, would a conquest domination work? Which, for anyone watching who doesn't know, it would basically mean there's multiple objectives to contest at the same time. So like a point A, B, and C, all potentially active, that all you could contest, and as you contest them or as you control them, you accrue points that eventually result in victory.
What are some other games that have domination? Like, what's just an example of one?
Call of Duty,
Call
I
of
believe,
Duty and
have.
Battlefield.
How many players
So-
do those normally have? I just worry that 6 wouldn't be enough. Like, I think it sounds really cool otherwise, though.
It depends.
I think the toughest situation you would have with this is the fact that there's only 2 healers.
Yeah.
And so, like in those 2 games or whatever game, I mean, does Halo have domination or I don't know. Anyways,
Versions
all
of
like,
it, I'm sure.
they're all like, okay, you can 1v1 somebody. Whereas like if you're sitting on a point like, oh, I'm gonna defend this point, I'm Zenyatta. Roadhog shows up, like he's like, what are you gonna do? Not to say that it couldn't be fun. I just think that would be like you feel helpless a lot of times because it's like, all right, let's go attack, and like, wait, don't it. Oh, we got hooked, you're dead. Okay, and then like, I don't know.
Much bigger fan of this idea when Goats was meta, because then it was like because Goats is a thing that exploited the fact that most of the objectives are just singular and we all can run together in the same spot and win the game. So domination or conquest or whatever we're going to call it forces you to split up and do exactly what you're saying. So it's sort of a meta deterrent against that, but we sort of don't need that with 2CP so much. There might be other reasons or other compelling reasons to pull it out, but it does require very self-sufficient heroes that aren't required teamwork to prop up. And I think that makes it kind of difficult for a lot of Overwatch players. It would be another mode a lot of people don't want to play because they want to stand safely behind their tanks and feel secure and safe in my blue shield blanket, my warm blue barrier blanket. They don't want to have to FPS out on their own, but.
Really, I think you've been saying that people do like that.
If you
really-
watch enough low ranked players gameplay, as much as like I understand a lot of the things you say. Obviously, when you're like, oh, everyone wants a deathmatch, but I think a lot of players approach the game in a don't die type of way, not in a I'm gonna ego challenge this, which it is trying to teach players how to improve. They often need to learn how to do that in order to reach certain ranks. Like Fitzy's smirking because maybe they do that too much at top 500. Then you have like my buddy PvP flanking Junkrat and Spawn boomer bust playstyle. Some people don't like playing with that, but it works half the time, and he carries the whole game other times. So yeah, that's my little rant in that. So
yeah,
players like the safety and security of easily slotting into a team comp, even though they might not necessarily have the teamwork to like win 2CP, for example, but to play King's Row and just sort of vaguely like, Zen or Ana especially, they feel great in a structured team comp. It's like, oh, I just get to sit back here and apply my support and I'm playing Overwatch. Whereas this kind of mode is like in your face, play Tracer or die, pretty much kind of thing, like out mechanic, and you'd be surprised how the percentage of the population of the players that aren't like signing up for that when they launch Overwatch.
Yeah, I agree. I think like on the face of it, it seems like, oh, well, this is a deathmatch mode. Everyone's going to love this. This is great. This is what we need. But at the same time, it also feels like it would be even more tactically challenging than 2CP because I feel like there would be very entrenched strategies of like, okay, we need X number of people on one point, X number of people on one point. Ignore the third point. Like it's a throw to even contest the third point. Like just focus on A and B kind of thing. And then one guy goes like, I can take C on my own. Don't worry, guys. And it's like, no, stop throwing. You're losing us the fight on this other point. And I feel like there would be a much more entrenched way of doing it at least in some certain people's mind. And I feel like there's more potential. While there's potential to pop off, there's also more potential to throw just by being the one person off somewhere when the rest of your team needed you. So, I mean, I'm not against it per se, but I think it could have a lot of gripes amongst the community.
And to talk about, you know, what people signed up for, and to go out on a little tangent. If we think about the beginning of Overwatch, and you know, at some point dive became very strong, and so players are like, yeah, dive. But then the soldiers, the like McCree players, the hit scans were like, fuck this. There's a diva in my face every single game. I'm leaving the game, and they left because they didn't like playing against dive. Fast forward, dive finally gets nerfed, and we were like, fuck Brig, I'm leaving the game. I can't play dive. Fast forward, now we've got good, you know, it's like every time they've changed the meta, there's been this, I don't want to play the game anymore because that's not what I signed up for. So to add another mode that is so different or whatever, and heck, even push might be like, I didn't sign up for push. I didn't sign up for 2CP. Whatever it is that like, they've changed the game from where it was and keep doing that to like, oh, this is the new next iteration. And while, you know, many players obviously are like, yeah, it's fun, whatever. I'm not like that's stubborn or whatever. Some people are like, I want to play McCree. I want to play Soldier. I want to play these things that like isn't Overwatch anymore. I want to play Goats, but we can't anymore. So I'm gonna leave. So adding a whole mode that's different and like requires this whole different thing. Now, something they could do if we're talking about bans still, and maybe you could ban a whole like modes of like, you know, you queue up and I'm gonna not queue for 2CP, and then 2CP you just never get 2CP. I'm not
Well,
gonna
it's not.
queue up for this different mode.
That really hurts
because
high level matchmaking, though. That's the only
It
problem.
Yeah.
does, it
But yeah.
does. But I mean, like, if there's that many people that don't want to play it, and like,
Yeah, it's not like an outlandish idea at all, because like again, Dota, to refer to other games, Dota has like a, you know, you can play all pick, you can play all random, you can play captain. So it's like, again, but it just comes with a ever present consideration. I think it's actually a very, very strong consideration right now for Blizzard, more so than I think anyone ever gives it credit for, is queue times. Like, I think so far in the forefront of Blizzard's mind right now is queue times. And one of the reasons we
Yeah.
don't see a lot of changes is simply
Yeah.
because we don't have the players,
Just
and we
can't
already
support
have
anymore.
like, yeah, exactly. We already have like, you know, Fitz, you will know this way better than me, because I play tank, so I never have to bother with queues. But you will like be sitting there for 15, 20 minutes for waiting
Right,
for a
it
game
varies.
sometimes. Yeah, right.
Yep.
So you have to, and so, and
And
I think as well. go
something,
ahead.
but something I could do is queuing as a support mode as well. Like, you can queue for all three roles.
Hmm.
And sometimes, like, let's say I like really wanted to play 2CP, I could just queue for 2CP by Xing, I don't know. But you know, they've given us the option to choose tank, support, or DPS, and they
Love
could
that.
give us the option to queue for certain maps and certain modes and blah blah blah. And maybe just the maps, you know, is like almost like queuing for modes, right? Because you could just, I'm not want to queue for any
Well, yeah.
2CP maps.
The
Yeah,
one
I suppose
issue
it's
with
like
that
that.
is,
Go ahead, Niandra.
oh, sorry. The only issue with that is that at the moment it seems that the queues prioritize just faster games more than anything. So if you queue for all three roles, you're basically just queuing for tanks with extra steps. So I think maybe what could be cool is if queues had two modes where you could prioritize, you know, quickness or fairness, for example, or whatever. So, you know, if you queue for all three and you don't want to find a game immediately, it's not going to do tank every time. And I think that could be like a neat little feature with
I
it
mean,
that might help a little bit.
that's where you just remove tank and you don't queue for tank.
Or you could do like a grace system where it's like, if you queued for tank, because that's the least
Oh.
prioritized role,
Mm.
like, here's your next game, you can go a little higher on the DPS list or whatever, just to kind of shorten your queue time there.
Sort of a reward for queuing tank.
Yeah, which seems to
Or-
be
or
at this
whatever
point what we have
in-demand
to
role
do.
I think
is.
Dota has that system right now. I can't remember. I haven't played
I
ranked
believe in
a bit.
League of Legends as well. Sometimes they just straight up don't let you get the thing you wanted or something. Like if I'm not mistaken, I don't play that game, but I have heard that. I'm fairly confident that more priority queue systems like you're discussing, like Grace or whatever you want to call it, is definitely going to be coming in Overwatch 2, I would say. Like, they've been gearing up towards it, I think, working the ins and outs. I did it before we move on, though. I wanted to ask Andy. I can't remember if we said in the podcast or before the show, but you said that you've had tournaments with the domination mode. I was wondering if
Yeah.
you could maybe advocate for the mode, because we kind of all poo-pooed it a little bit. Like, advocate for the mode in your experience. Like, how has it worked? I would imagine it might be a better thing for open queue, but what
Yeah,
is
so
in your
it's
experience?
definitely way closer to the clusterfuck of open queue. Of it's you're saying like, oh, teams might coordinate and stay on the points and like only have like point 1 and 2 where just leave the third one up because you'll eventually win by doing that. It's so much. It's basically like a team deathmatch more than it's an objective mode. You know, basically the teams just spread out all across the map. It's kind of chaos. People are having these one-on-one fights everywhere. It's not really an organized sort of thing. Like obviously teams could organize, but the gameplay I've seen so far of it is people just get overwhelmed by the like 3 objectives and start running off to go. Like there's one guy on your third objective, you go run and try and kill him, but then he's ran away. And like what ends up happening is, because the maps in Overwatch are actually kind of large, is that you'll like go to defend a point and they'll cap it and then they'll run away and then you just stand there capping the point. And I think it's right now, until we get something like a map editor, it's not really too viable because just the maps aren't set up for something like a 3CP, conquest, domination sort of thing. But I think once something like a map editor comes in, like I totally see it as a viable sort of fast-paced mode to try out. I don't know that you'd want the role queue lock like 222 in it. I think it kind of favors something more like a 3 DPS, 2 tank, 1 healer, or more just about taking one-on-one fights than it is about taking huge team fights because of how spread out everything is. But no, I think it's an interesting mode that could have some potential. It's like a kind of like how 2CP is the pace change towards really slow. It's kind of the opposite. It's like really fast, really chaotic, and definitely there's some people that really like that. So personally, I don't hugely like it in that it's way more chaotic than any other mode would be. And I don't know what's the general player's opinion on, like, do they really hate chaotic? Freedo, you're kind of saying that they want to just stay behind a shield and team up. Maybe they won't like this sort of mode.
Right. Well, it's probably the most mechanically demanding, like FPS wise. If like Assault is the most game mode understanding, then this is the other way, where
absolutely.
Which is why I was excited for it as a concept during GOATs, because I feel the best comp for Domination would have been the comp that ended up countering GOATs with ball triple DPS, like you're saying. And because you want speed to be able to back cap, and you want to be able to out mechanic. And so that could have fixed that problem then. But I just feel that normal Overwatch has already got a good balance. So like we're not in desperate need of solving that problem necessarily. But
yeah, I agree. I think if every game mode was 2CP, then this would be like, oh yeah, we really need something like this. But we do have Koth, we have payload assault, or not assault. What's the other one? Hybrid. Like we have alternatives to 2CP that aren't as slow and boring.
Yeah.
Hey now.
Whoa. My summer. No, go ahead, Freedo.
One last point. It would feel terrible, I think, in role lock if like you weren't good at Lucio or Mercy, who play well in those like fluid deathmatchy ways and can get away. Like if you want to play Zen, I'm like, I think you're just gonna have a horrible time in Domination.
Work. Like like a Bastion sitting on a point is going to do absolutely nothing. Like it actually will expose a lot of the characters that are really specific to defense oriented scenarios. Like I basically think you probably only play Tracer, Soldier, Ball, that sort of characters where you can get around really fast.
Yeah, and I just wanted to like summarize the Andy's question, which was like, what do you think the players want? I think they want coordination, but they play like the deathmatch. I think that's how I would summarize it. Is that players think they're always like, we want coordination, and then you ask them to do the things that require coordination. They're like, no, fuck that. Why would I do that? But I actually want to get into discussion now, because I think we've kind of touched in many ways around it, and I kind of want to get into the, because I suppose this falls into the category of mode. So we're saying Domination, Conquest would probably be better without a role lock. We've seen we have open queue, but it's not all that popular. I mean, it's popular enough that Blizzard left it in, but it's also not a super seriously taken game mode. What is the future? What do we want? Like, do we want role lock less? Do we want to keep role lock? And after that, Fitzy, let's get into the bans as well. Let's get into the bans as well, because I think we're close enough. We've skirted the issue. We may as well dive in. So first role lock versus non-role lock. How do we feel? Niandra, what do you think?
I actually play quite a bit of open queue. Masochist and all. There's like 20 people playing it. Not many people take it seriously. So surely that indicates that, role queue has been a good decision.
In the West,
But is it
at
also
least.
because
Korea, it's very popular, but
Oh,
I think
really?
it's the one region that really likes it. But I think they just
Huh.
like another rank. Like they're just so
Right.
competitive. It's like here's another thing to get a rank in, and you could have, I wouldn't be surprised if they like play Lucio ball competitively, or you know what I mean? Like I wonder if it's just a cultural esports thing. But yeah, otherwise I do agree. I have played quite a bit of open queue. My buddy Nateson likes it quite a bit, and he begs me to play it. I he likes open queue more, and I'm trying to think back to the reasons why he says that. Like it fits fluidly to deal with some of the Overwatch problems that we've already discussed with like with role queue. It's designed, your teammate does this for you, and if they don't, you have to like figure it out, and it's a big challenge. Whereas in open queue, you're gonna be like, nah, I'm gonna pick that. Like I'm gonna pick an extra tank. I'm gonna pick a healer or whatever, right? Like you can more fluidly deal with problems with randoms in the game. But I kind of hate it. Like it's mostly fine a lot of the time, but I'm definitely not disappointed with role queue. I think it's been a massive success with some serious problems that need addressing, like high level queue times. Sinatra famously was like, why do I want to wait forever? And if you're like that, it's a very specific case, but those are things they have to deal with. Fitzy's queue times being 15 minutes, that's quite long, right? So there's downsides,
And
but I think it
it's
was for the
honestly,
greater good.
it's been a little better. Granted, I haven't been like top 50. I've been like mid top 500 queuing in morning, so it hasn't. It's rarer to go past 10 minutes. Like it depends on time of day, how high ranked or whatever. But yeah,
And
once you get super high up, it's like you have to queue at prime time, or you're not going to get a game for a while.
And how do you personally feel about that? Like, are you fine to queue longer for a
I mean, I
good
have a
game?
stream
Or
to talk to, so but not everybody does. Not everybody does. I mean, there's people in gold that are queuing for 15 minutes, and they're like, "What do you do during that?"
yeah,
Granted, I was used to queuing for Dota games and then them lasting for 50 minutes. So, but yeah, per the open queue and being able to deal with stuff, I know for me when it would be like, okay, they've got, let's say I queue in the morning, and pretty much what happens an okay amount of times, like let's say I'm ranked 50 or whatever, and then I'm gonna go. What's gonna happen is my team's gonna be like rank 50, Grandmaster, Master, 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 Master. Then the other team's gonna have rank 50, Grandmaster, Master, 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 or something of similar because it's balanced. I'm not a carry player. I'm not like a go Widowmaker and just shit on everybody because their positioning's terrible. I'm like a team coordination person. Go together. So what would happen is, and it still happens, is I'll be like, okay, let's play the game. Oh, they've got a Widowmaker, and I'm on Sombra, and they've got a Pocket Mercy with a Brigida just sitting by her. So she's just gonna kill everybody because I've got Masters players on my teams. So bad. No. But the Widowmaker player is going to catch them out of position because they're like, oh, haha, it's Juggertown. I'm walking along. Oh, I died because I peeked a corner. Because Masters play, like, it's just different levels of game sense and blah blah blah. So there's turns into this like carry player versus carry player. So I would go ball, and then the team couldn't deal with ball well enough because they weren't as good as dealing with ball because they were Masters players. But now I can't do that because I'm stuck on DPS, and now sometimes I have to pull out the Ash or the Widowmaker or something to like get around the fact that I can't go to ball because they've got Devil Snipers, because my tanks don't know how to deal with the Widowmaker, because my team doesn't know how to deal with it. So I do miss that aspect of the game of like, they've got Double Sniper, I go ball, run them over, ground pound, we're good. Yeah. Anyways,
yeah, I concur, because I kind of came up on Overwatch as a flex player, in the sense of like, I'll play whatever the team needs to win. and that's certainly something I miss. I think in a similar way to 2CP, when we said like when 2CP is great, it's really good and it's beautiful, and when it's bad, it's really bad. Like it's just a nightmare. And I think OpenQ is kind of like that, where it's like when it comes together well, it's great, but then when you have like 5 hit scan players all in the same team, and just like nobody refuses to switch, it's just like, well, why do I play this game, right? Like sometimes you have those PTSD flashbacks when I'm like, oh god, yeah, of course I dream about playing flex, but then I remember I had 4 DPS players in every single game.
The good thing about OpenQ now is I feel the playing community knows so much more about Overwatch, as much as we bash them for not, but like I feel in the first couple of years before we had role queue, players legitimately just didn't know what to pick a lot of the time, like to make comps work, or they thought they knew, but it wasn't right for the situation. It was just, when you have open queue, it's way more complicated. Whereas with role queue, it limits both teams significantly. I think a byproduct, negative wise, is kind of what Fitzy was describing, which I would say like the balance within a role is sort of more intensified to the point where, because you can't stack multiple tanks and shields are nerfed, then now hit scans are kind of above. But luckily, they've done a good job balancing overall, despite that kind of being an issue. Like, because you're limited on a role, like what you want out of that role can tend to like condense so much so that we've seen, Sigma and Orisa kind of ruined role queue a bit in that way, where they did everything right, like that you needed from the role. But they've eventually worked through it, and it's in a good place. So I don't think that's too much of a concern, assuming they continue to balance well. But yeah, open queue can be terrible, just based on like, it's not a competitive option. Let's put it that way. Like that's what I ultimately come down on it. It's not really competitive to me.
Well, and the thing is that well, maybe not. I was gonna say that like the top players aren't necessarily playing it, so naturally,
right. But
it's not going to evolve as fast, and it's not going to be,
when everyone
played
it, though,
balanced for it either.
Yeah, it's not anymore. But I'm also, when I'm saying it, I also mean back in the day before we had role queue too. Like the same problems still come up.
Everybody is playing what they want to play. Essentially, you don't have to worry about like, oh, well, I'm playing Ana, so our team kind of sucks because nobody wanted to play Ana, so I have to play Ana. And now, like, we just kind of won because of the matchmaking. Granted, matchmaking still happens, and you win because of the matchmaking, because you got to do one trick versus Pharaoh one trick or something. But
something I hated, though, and this is really tough to teach new players, is when the enemy has a comp and you don't. That's the thing. Like, that's one beauty of role queue, is that it's simplified it. It's downside because it like condenses the power inside the roles, but it's not like they can go 3 tanks against your Widowmaker. Like you have to deal with it in your role. So
it's harder for them to just
like,
call
hey, we need a shield because they've got a Widowmaker. We need a Reinhardt or whatever.
But people don't pick that.
Zarya, let's go on Junkertown. Like,
yeah,
but anything.
In open queue, I feel like that was just worse all the time. Like you'd have 5 DPS, right, instead of any tanks. So the gap between your comps could be much more severe in open queue, where your comp could be much worse and your comp could be much better in when you have no limitations on the roles. Like so much so that you could have goats versus a bunch of DPS no heals. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
hey, I've won those games.
Well, yeah, it's a weird way, because it's like this weird dichotomy where it's like, yeah, you as an individual player had more power, but you also were somehow more helpless sometimes when your team was completely off, right? It's like, it's this weird, hard to balance, like, or weird dichotomy. Andy, sorry, you haven't spoken in a while. Do you have any thoughts on roll-off the open queue?
I think role queue kind of leveled the playing field a bit. Like, you don't join a match and by default you've kind of lost, because you have 5 DPS players that literally, or 5 tank players that can't even, shoot a gun in the first place. As a tank player, I'm saying that, by the way. But I think it makes it overall more fun and more even across, a large amount of matches. Like, I think it's pretty easy for us to forget how bad it used to be.
Yeah.
I think people don't remember. People remember, but maybe they think back kind of with rose-tinted glasses of, oh, I remember when I could pick, say, for example, Hammond to counter Widow. Yeah, but there was also like 5 DPS players playing DPS and 1 support that's running around with their head on fire, So no, I think Rocky's.
Don't get me wrong. I love being able to queue up and not have to worry about like
Exactly. Yeah, like I just hate that feeling when you join the game and you see, like, you recognize the players. Say if you're in a high level, you're like, oh, we have 5 tank players. We actually can't win because they've got perfect 2-2-2 on the other team. That feeling was awful, and I felt like that happened way more than, say, like the in-role imbalance that you're talking about, Fitzy, of, they have a great Widow player and I'm a Sombra player. I don't feel like that happens as much compared to just people not
it's
on the
more of
role.
like a play style.
Hmm.
Like if I, if I was a super high rated, let's say the carry versus carry, and I was a super high rated Doomfist, and they had a super high rated Pharah, like we're gonna struggle.
Yeah.
That's just like, again, the matchmaker and play style and stuff. But as you go on later on and you get a more even game, more. Okay, we've got mostly grandmasters, no masters. Then it's like the team overall as a unit. Again, this is more like me enjoying team play and everyone doing their part. So.
Yeah, again, I think at its best and at its highest level, it was beautiful, and I would still hold on to the hope of someday some return. Although the deeper we go down 2-2-2, the harder that ever becomes because, the balance just goes so deep. But at the same time, bearing in mind the majority of the player base, for them, I think it's just been a gigantic boon. Like I just know that, in the metal ranks, below diamond, it's just like, save the Lord that we don't have to, at least there's some structure to what were already massively unstructured games. And they still are unstructured in many ways, but it's a much better framework to start from, I think, for the majority of the player base. So as much as I personally preferred the open queue style flexibility, I understand. But now I will trigger the ultimate question. Since we're kind of going into Overwatch 2, like what could happen? Could we have map vetoes? Could we have mode vetoes? Is there a world where bans come in? Is there a world where we're allowed to have a mode like a captain's mode or something? Because for those you don't know, in Dota, there's like the pro mode is captain's mode. Theoretically, if you're just a solo queue player, you could just go all pick mode where everybody gets to pick their hero and do whatever the fuck you want. But then there's captain's mode, which is like the hard, try hard, sweaty mode where each team has a captain and they pick a ban and they pick a pick. So is there a room for something like that in Overwatch? I know like 3 of us in the call are at least confirmed hero ban aficionados. So in that spirit, I'll start with Niandra. I don't know where you stand on this, Niandra. How do you feel?
With hero bans, the main concern I always have with hero bans is just worrying that like Overwatch doesn't have enough heroes for it. But I think that captain mode actually sounds really cool. I don't know if you would want it in like actual ranked, but maybe it's like a separate thing. I would love to see that. Just try it out for a tournament or two. Although it does kind of like require to be playing with people who are like very flexible and stuff, which means that it might have like quite a small player base. But yeah, I think it'd be fun.
Well, if it's like a volunteered mode, like as we
Yeah.
suggested with like 2CP, then you're signing up to be like, okay, well, I'm playing captain's mode, so I know what I'm doing, kind of thing, right? And that's the theory, anyways.
I think the ranked mode we have now, which leans casual, is the right route for ranked. But what I would like to see is in-game tournament weekends and the pro scene adopt it. That's what I want. Like I want a separate rule set, and you go into that with it, because I think that the problem that you bring up of, is my teammate flexible enough? You don't want to ban out someone's like top hero, and then like the gameplay would be bad that way with random people. I think it's not great with randoms. I don't really have a concern of the number of heroes. I think we already have enough for it. But I think the player base, it's another layer of complexity where players have to learn much more, and we're already discussing how like we can't get past the choke, right? With the hero, with all the heroes available, because people just self-hero ban by not learning everything. Forced hero bans means you're forced to learn more things, and makes the game more complex. So I think pre-made teams, it's amazing. With randoms, I am worried, and I kind of hope it doesn't happen, and they separate it like that.
Fitzy.
I mean,
You want me to go? Okay.
You go, man. Go. Get him.
I'll talk for an hour. So
I'm happy.
bans, I come from StarCraft, come from Dota. Again, map bans, and then also hero bans.
Man,
and you were
after my
talking
heart.
about the difference between all pick, and captain's mode. And captain's mode, yes, great. Pro scene, everything, whatever. That'd be perfect. Perfect. For ladder, being that all pick is, even when there's all pick, there's still bans. And you can do it in a similar fashion of 12 people pick someone they want to ban, and then it only picks 2 of those 12 votes. Or you could even do a vote phase real quick where it's like 15 seconds and it pulls up the roster and everyone clicks and whoever got the most, whatever. Random would be, and by random I mean like the 12 people pick what they want to ban, and then it randomly selects 2 or 3 or whatever amount they deem worthy. Would make it so that at least every single game your hero doesn't get banned. Like if I play every game, I don't care that I don't get to play Sombra every single game, as long as I get to play it sometimes. Like if I pick to ban, if every single game everyone's like, oh, they got Fitzy, oh yeah, it's ban Sombra, and then like I literally never get to play Sombra, then like, okay, yeah, that would suck. But at the same time, having the, we had the Orisa Sigma, we had the double shield stuff. If like every single game you get a chance to ban one of those tanks, and if like 12 people, like 8 of them pick Reinhardt to ban, and like there's a high chance that Reinhardt's gonna be banned, like, oh good, we don't have to play Reinhardt this game. I think that just adds the variety. Granted, right now with balance and wise, there is enough variety, I think, but that all comes down to, and I guess a big reason of why I like the ban system is, okay, if they're not going to balance the game fast enough, or something super oppressive that has like 100% pick rate, if we're thinking back to like Moth meta with the Mercy that was in like 95% of your games, because actually she was in 100% of your games, it was just like 95% on your team. Like she was that good. She was that good. Brigitte, very similar, like for a while. Obviously it slowly has toned down, but she still for so long was so good. And to have the chance to like, oh, I don't have to play against that for one game. Nice. I get some variety. I don't have the oppressive flying around Mercy, have to res 4 things. And so that's where, again, if the devs don't balance fast enough something that is oppressive, then you get that more variety. Even if we look back to like when Genji was like, oh, now he does 30 damage for shurikens, and for like what was that, a month or something, he was pretty oppressive. It was like, oh, here comes Nanoblade every single game. And just have like a little variety. Obviously for like, that was only a month and people were already starting to be like, holy shit, we need to stop. And they did change it. So it was only, there for a month. But you wouldn't really have to worry about that problem as much of like every single game going into it. So ban system, I'm all for it. I don't know how they could do it, or rather there I do know ways they could do it. It depends on what they want to do with it. And again, if we're talking about having more modes that we can opt out of, there could be the ranked, and there could be the all pick, and there could be the captain's mode, that you could queue up to and not get it every game, but at least like if I'm like, you know what? I don't like playing against the double sniper. I want to be able to ban one of them. I'm going to queue captain's mode or whatever, and not have to worry about something that's oppressive out of my hands.
You can pick multiple queues in Dota, right? Is that
Yes.
what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that we often forget, that Overwatch is one queue at a time. But
Right.
in Dota, you can select multiple, and you will have a different
Getting
format.
captain's mode, if I pick all pick and something else, and what is all pick, quick draft, or whatever it's called,
It's like random draft, all
pick,
random
draft, and captain's mode, I could queue for all those, but most of the time I'm going to get all pick because most of the people queue for that. So I'm somewhat of like, I could queue DPS, tank, and support. Most of the time I'm going to get DPS, but every now and then I'll get that captain's mode game, So that's my stance on it. I'm all for bans because it gives power to the players to not have to wait on the devs to do something if there's a problem.
Yeah, I will match your him in a second, but Andy, I'll let you go first.
Honestly, so the thing with hero bans is the power to players. Is it Fitzy? That's kind of what you want out of it. Is you want to change your experience. You don't want to have the same thing over and over and over again.
As I play Sombra every game.
Well, different people around you though are playing different things. So,
right.
But yeah, so exactly. Is that why hero pools wasn't particularly liked then? Was it because it wasn't in the player control, or?
So even though that wasn't in the player control, I was like, this is one step closer. We're getting there. And the fact that I didn't have to play against a Brigitte every game while she was in her state that she was, I was thrilled. I was like, oh, she's banned for this week. I have a full week of like, I know they're not going to have Brigitte. And
I feel
like,
like a hero pool system that changed more quickly than just 1 week might be closer, like more realistic to what we already know that the systems that they have. You know, if they just change that, so like say every day the hero pool changes, maybe that would satisfy that sort of hero ban thing without having to make a whole new system, you know, a whole new matchmaking, captain pick, all that sort of stuff.
Didn't
Yeah,
that
I
hurt
mean,
like our players?
yeah, I
Uh,
think it had a negative
Like
impact on
punishment?
the pro scene, but on a personal level as well. Like,
this
go
is
ahead,
that
Andy.
huge divide that exists between pro scene and casual. It's like,
But
what do
even
you
on a
balance? Do you change the game for?
even on a casual level, though, my personal gripe with hero pools is that it's manufactured, like it's manufactured variety in the sense of like you can opt out of it. You can opt out of like just playing that day or that week,
yep, yeah,
and
yeah.
you could still be like a top 100 Orisa who only plays in the week that Orisa is strong, right? And
Right.
the whole point
the
of for
point-
me, oh, go ahead, Fitzy, you go.
No, sorry, I could go.
Oh, I'll quickly finish and let you vibe. I was going to say the point for me is that the reason I like bans is because they force you to think smarter about the game. Basically, you're forced to improvise in a setting that you didn't prepare for, right? It's like you got put in a game. How do you adapt now that this character's banned? Go like, and now now the team that adapts the best, the team that's sort of quickest on their feet, is rewarded for their game knowledge essentially, which is I think as we've already spoken about, an increasingly undervalued commodity in Overwatch, where it's like the more you kind of rigidize the game and the more you make it like 2-2-2, so that's already one element of team composition out of the picture. And then when you make, you know, double off tank meta, even now, like there's a lot of complaints about like main tanking is just really hard if you're not with a super coordinated team, and we spoke about 2CP being really hard if you're not in a coordinated team. So as we already kind of shift away from player knowledge being valued as an important commodity, I feel like being able to ban something and have some level of autonomy of like, okay, I just impacted your game in this way that you didn't plan. Like how you gonna play now? Whereas obviously with hero pools, it's like, well, I'll just won't play when Brigitte's banned because I'm a Brigitte one trick.
Yep.
So that's what I like about bans, anyways. But Fritzy, go ahead.
Agreed.
The other point I was going to say is you can ask your chat right now. If you ask just the bronze players who they want to ban, and what they respond with is probably going to be
Exactly.
something along the lines of Bastion, Reaper, and Symmetra. And in top 500, we're like, get Widowmaker out of my game. So it gives the powers to the player of like variety of skill as well. And even like, I know, I mean, you said you played Dota. Like I was like, Slark. I banned Slark every game. I hated that hero. I was like running around as Rubik. Get the hell away from me. I didn't
Well,
want
yeah,
to
again,
buy
it's
Sentry Wards because my team was just didn't want to buy Sentry Wards, and he was always invis and whatever. And so giving the powers to the players of like somebody's that bias, like I hate playing against Hanzo. I don't even care if he's meta. I just don't like playing against him. I think he's just really annoying to play against. For Sombra mainly, of course. And so if I have a game where like, oh, I don't have to deal with a Hanzo, and sometimes it's like, there's a Torbjorn. His turret just keeps hitting me every time I go for a hack. Like I want to be able to play that game where it's like, I don't have to worry about that hero. And I'm sure there's Pharah players that are like, I don't want to have to play against a Widowmaker. Okay, now that Widowmaker's banned, we can play Pharah on this map, even though normally we wouldn't be able to. So now you're adding more variety to the things. And yeah. Anyways,
well,
variety
like,
is my.
No, go ahead. Finish the sentence.
I was just saying variety is my like biggest thing for the hero bands. But then again, I play every single day. Not everyone plays every day, so they don't really care. You know, a meta that lasts for a month isn't as important to somebody that plays 2 times a week as opposed to me playing every single day because it goes stale quicker.
The thing I want to add to this conversation though is that meta doesn't apply to most players.
To the most players,
even when it's really bad. Even with Moth Mercy, I mean, somewhat, yeah, a lot of Mercy players ranked up. But if you are, I only play Zen, like it doesn't really matter. Like this is how I described it recently. But when the game's balanced improperly, where you rank kind of is in relation to. Did I say improperly? That's what I meant to say. When the game's balanced poorly, where you rank is like where your heroes line up against what's actually OP and oppressive. Because there's like a lot of Genji players that just played Genji when he was terrible for longest time, and then obviously, and then the balance tweaked where he's like good or whatever, not bad, and they're probably going to rank up. Like aside from them improving and learning the game and all that,
they would stay kind of more where they're at because the hero would get banned. Like they wouldn't be able to climb as much because that hero would get banned because it's oppressive and it's buffed and whatnot.
The problem is they're not really trying to rank up a lot of times. A lot of players aren't actually trying to improve or learn the game or whatever. They're just trying to hit Q and play
ranked.
So right. I want them to do these things. This is just my concern, right? That people's approach to the game doesn't fit the higher levels. I'm really excited for it for GM, but maybe even more specifically the pro games where they have series of multiple maps in a row rather than just one map. But this is my point, where players' approach to the game doesn't fit necessarily. Like the player base we have, it doesn't necessarily jive with learning a deeper game, because a huge percentage of players just want to play the heroes they like. Like that's like, I don't know, I can't put a number to it, but it's a lot.
Even and I feel ranked. Like that's a concern, where it's like, I just want to play that one hero. Like as much as I want to play Sombra, I'm not going to be like, oh, they introduced a hand ban system, I'm gone. Like I just want to play Sombra. I stop stopping me from playing the hero I want. Because if the game is ranked, like it's competitive, like it's called competitive, then like you don't want to just play that one hero. Or rather, like I feel like if that's the only defense as to what's holding back the overall balance of the game, because then they can go a little crazier on like, okay, let's give Genji this little extra buff, and it's like, it's not a big deal because people can ban him if he's too oppressive.
I'm gonna have to devil's advocate you, Fitzy. As much as it's paining me deep inside, as much as I deeply love hero bans, as a podcast host, I have to do this, because we spoke earlier about pro players in your games tryharding, right? And you were like, I don't want to just pick what they want me to pick, right? And it's kind of like, it's degrees of it, right? You're saying when you go competitive, like, well, this is competitive, so you better play properly. But then someone else might have an even more rigid definition of what properly is, and they might say, well, these are the 6 meta heroes, so you better play this, Fitzy, or you're a thrower. And then lower down the chain, there's people who are like, I just want to play, and that's competitive is better than quick play, so I play. And I totally get where Freedo's coming from, because when the ban argument was more prevalent, people were like, the most frequently heard counter arguments I heard were from, at least particularly from players in the metal ranks, were, but I just want to play Overwatch. Why would you ban the hero I want to play? Like, that just makes it unfun for me. Why would you do this? My
position has moved. Like I used to be bans for everybody. Like just get good. Like it's a real game. But I've been forced to have to respect the player base we have, essentially. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, I agree with you. Like I wanted, if it was just up to me purely, if I was now Jeff Kaplan tomorrow, and what a day that would be, I would be like, yeah, fuck it, go hero bans everybody. Like, you better get good, kid. But I spent a long time on this. I hosted several weeks of pickup games with the ban systems. We tried lots of different types of ban systems. And people always were like, this was really fun. But then they were like, yeah, but I wouldn't want this in ladder ever. Like, it takes too long. Like, firstly, they were like, well, it takes like 15 minutes to ban everything and figure it all out. Because it was
a heck ban system.
It's because it was like, because we tried a lot of different systems, and sometimes people were like, this is so complicated, can you explain it again? That's kind of like just a new teething problem, so that would go away. But even then, sometimes people are like, 2 more minutes to ban stuff? I don't want, I already queued 5 minutes, I don't want 2 more minutes. So like the time was one consideration. And then like, but what if I get in a team with someone who doesn't want to ban the same thing and we have to argue? And it's just like, it was just like,
that's what I was saying. I mean, you said you've played all pick, where there's still bans in all pick.
Yeah.
Like it could be that where it's just like literally 10 seconds, where it's like, the assemble your team thing. It could just take 10 seconds from that. So time concern wouldn't be there. But
continue. I think the point that needs to be just expressed though about this, that all ban advocates I think should understand, that I've been forced to understand, is that we're trying, the ban thing doesn't solve a problem they have at most ranks. Like most players, when they approach any game, like this makes more sense like in a fighting game, where if I just want to play Link, I can only ever play Link for my whole career and never play anything else. I think we need to realize how difficult of a game Overwatch truly is, and like the depth that exists. And it's just a vast sea of complexity with all the different maps, different heroes, different interactions, and forcing someone who isn't attempting to be a top 500 or pro to engage in the game in that way it's just so much more hardcore than what people are interested in. And you really want to keep those players playing and enjoying the game. And luckily, and back to my first point, the problem of meta oppressiveness does not exist for most players. Like right now, the game's balanced well. So in ranked, I feel a lot of strategies are prevalent and a lot of heroes get used. And at any point, if a hero can get value on the map, like just because the map works for it, it's going to work. Now, at the pro scene, I strongly believe that wouldn't be the case, and you would still see like 1.5 comps get played. And that's just the factor of when teams optimize or when high level ranked players optimize, that's where meta gets oppressive. So that's why I try to gear the focus towards the problem fixing where it is a problem, because go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I agree with your point. That's where hero bans being one mode selectable out of others would be a solution to that, so you don't have to opt into it if you're silver and you don't want bans. The other thing is that it's not just meta staleness that is something that hero bans would address. It's also this sort of, it's not, again, we're in a phase now where it's not so much of a problem, but hero brokenness is a problem that it also addresses, which is universal. Like, again, as Fitzy alluded to, what a bronze player will ban is completely different to the constant Widowmaker bans that will come in top 500. And I know from experience, like, how much difficulty players in gold have, like, with a Bastion, like just a Bastion strat, and they might just want to, and particularly on certain maps, like if we're still talking about map diversity and all that, you know, playing Anubis, you might be like, I just want to ban Junkrat because I don't want to go through that choke with a Junkrat against me, right? So, yeah, like, I agree with you. I agree with you that it's not viable, but for everyone.
Question, though, what does that solve, though? Like, should they have to learn how to beat Junkrat on Anubis?
Yeah, I get that argument. It's like, it's hard to say, right? It's like, on the one hand, I agree with, it's like, again, yeah, you get good, like, learn how to beat Junkrat. At the same time, it's also like, do I want to have to play him every single like time I enter Anubis? And it's like, also, do I have the time to teach my teammates how to deal with Junkrat, or can I just do it myself, like by banning him, essentially, right? It's kind of the go ball argument of like, I can't convince my team to properly play around the Junkrat, but I could probably convince them to ban him and circumvent the problem that way. But anyways, I've rambled. This side of the screen has rambled a lot. Andy, Niandra, do you guys have any thoughts? I know we got carried away there. Sorry, we're passionate folk.
My thoughts on hero bans always used to be that we wouldn't need them if we got the aggressive balancing that Blizzard promised us in the past. But I do kind of feel like you guys have made some pretty good points against that. You know, like, you know, a month for Genji being overpowered, I guess, isn't like the longest time. So yeah, do you guys feel like hero bans would work better if like SR decay was still in the game? Because, you know, if my favorite hero is banned for a week, I can just like not play. And I don't know if that kind of defeats the purpose of it, if I can just kind of avoid it if I wish.
Well, that was the problem with hero pools, but hero bans would obviously would be per game.
It might be. Right, yeah. Okay.
It'd be like each lobby picks the bans for that specific game.
Yeah, I think that could be interesting. Would you want to like hide player names of the enemy team before doing it? Or would you want people to
I don't
like
think
see
that
a
would really
streamer?
matter, because
people might
people are
ban
just
your
gonna stream
Sombra.
snipe. Yeah, but people are gonna just stream snipe, like.
Well,
okay.
The first element of that is that,
oh, who is this? Let me look at the top 5 streamers and like, oh look, there's that person. They're in my game. Okay, like, I personally, I don't give a shit. Like, if they're respect banning me, like at one of the internationals of Dota, one team banned every single offlaner, and which is essentially a role, whatever. They were essentially banning this one person's hero pool, the entire pool, and he just had to get he had to get better at every single next hero, because they just kept on like, we're just gonna ban every single hero this guy plays, and he's gonna have to play something else because we don't want to play against that. We don't want to play against that. So, anyways, essentially, if I get a respect ban that like, oh, we don't want to play a Sombra, ooh, then like, I don't care. But that's me. And I know a lot of streamers are like, oh, I'm targeted. People are focusing me. And it's like, well, yeah, you're a streamer. You kind of put yourself there. Like, I don't know. But that's,
yeah.
And to the same point of the one tricks of like, oh, you're a Torbjorn one trick. Okay, well, yeah, they're gonna focus ban you. Like, get good. But yeah, you know, it does get back to you can go back to the, okay, you can get good, blah blah blah, go back and forth between, is the game a casual game or is it a competitive game? For me, yeah, obviously I want competitive, and then there's people that just want to queue up. And you know, I come from professional gaming background and stuff, so I do have that very competitive thing. I just haven't, you know, gone pro. Yeah. Anyways, sorry, I kind of rambled there.
No,
There
no.
was a
Go ahead,
there was
Freedo.
a show match. My favorite. This is probably my favorite way I've seen bands work. A show match that the Overwatch League put on through Apex and of like old like Lunatic High and Runaway, like the organizations they had. And the band format they had was there was like a bunch of bands at the start of the series, and as the maps went on, they got lifted or unbanned or something like that, or it was the opposite. I can't remember, but what I thought was cool about that is that then you could see evolution through a series. I think that's the most important thing to me is high level competition that you don't like seeing the same meta on every map or the same mirror match for every map of a long series. I think is not what viewers want, and for that matter doesn't really represent the game that players play at home. At home, you come up with the problem of Junkrat on Anubis or Widow on Rialto. Not on every map like it is in top 500 or not Rialto. Havana is what I meant
Havana.
to say. Right. Like I think the casual player does experience that variety naturally, no matter the meta, right? Just based on the knowledge of hero interactions and whatever. Like it's not oppressive to them, even when it's broken, because players like maybe don't want to learn Brig, except for the few that do in Rise when she's broken, right? Like that. There's that the social aspect of rank that I think takes the weight there, but I almost see no downsides to it being introduced into the tournament mode I want or the Overwatch League over the course of multiple maps. Like I think Huck did each map a team gets one ban. I think the loser gets one ban. Loser gets one ban. It's like such a delicate solution, right? That like would make it series interesting as it goes on. For the most part, I also am excited for that to be something I could play in a game because of being such an Overwatch nerd. Having the same teammates, we're in a tournament. Let's say like all of us want to group up. We want to go into a tournament that's like appropriately ranked for our average SR. We can adapt map to map, and I think that's like, especially for streamer content, I think that's amazing when they've done like Franz tournaments or whatever, or ones around that size. I think that being in the game, like that's where you see hero bands really shine, because then you can talk within your team and be on the same page, right? You don't get the situation where it's like, sorry, I only play Zen. Well, Zen's banned. I'm going AFK, right? Like you don't want that in with randoms, basically. Like Overwatch, you need that teamwork and coordination to say, okay, like if we're playing with I'm trying to think like Yeedle in some of these tournaments, insane ball player, but it's made better by his teammates playing around him and enabling that, or Fitzy Sombra or whatever, right? Like we can lean into our strats as a team, and that is what people love, I think, about like competitive Overwatch. Ranked Overwatch, though, it's more like selfish and limiting based on what you know. So you just sort of do your best with what you got. And yeah, ways to intensify the problem of your teammates not being able to do the thing you need them to do is it concerns me for the average player.
Yeah, I think there's basically so many nuances depending on what system you select for banning. To kind of summarize Niandra's original question, which was like, do you private the profiles? I think that's, again, it's like one of those nuances, right? Like in gold and platinum, it just wouldn't matter. Like you get, most profiles are already private, so you can't really tell what you're up against or with. And with the first world problems of Fitzy, like being a huge streamer, is like, as much as I sympathize, like if he wanted to play Sombra and he kept getting banned, that's like 0.001% of the player base being affected. So it's like a very minor problem. But we could just go on about this over and over. So I want to just like shift up just so that we don't get too focused on this one issue. And did you have anything to say before I switch topics here?
Honestly, Freedo said most of what I would have said there. I totally agree that I don't think hero bands matter for, I don't know, like below Masters, Diamond, that sort of area. Like I think it does more negative, not even negative. It's pointless because, like you're saying, there's no meta at that level. So, like, you're not affecting anything by doing hero bands at that rank. But I do think for high ranks, it is better. It is, as Fitzy, as you're saying, it adds a kind of diversity to the whole game.
I think it would be very interesting to see how many players just like despise playing against one hero. I know support players hate playing against Doomfist. I know, there's certain heroes that you're just like, I don't want to play that. Like you queue up and you're just like, if I had to play against that, I'm gonna be pissed. And how many people would just like feel good about that hero getting like, I don't want to play against that game. It's a completely different I mean, not a completely different solution. Like there's no solution to a problem necessarily there, but there's more of just like the enjoyment of like, I can play a casual game ranked of Overwatch and not have to worry about the thing that frustrates me. So it's more enjoyable.
Yeah, I think
we're
people
going. That's more of
Go
like
ahead.
they're getting enjoyment. We're getting more of like balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think people underestimate that. Like, it's not about meta staleness with the metal ranks. It's about banning something that's oppressive. And I actually don't think the reason why people in like platinum and below dislike bans is not because they don't know what they do with the ban. Like, they'd be delighted to ban Doomfist the fuck out of here. I think the bigger worry for them is not being able to play their hero. I think that's what it always
Right,
comes
right.
down to.
Yeah.
It's never like I wouldn't like. It doesn't matter. My team doesn't have the strategy to ban. No, they're just worried that they won't get to play the hero they want to play.
And that's where it's like you're playing ranked. I don't know. To me, like, I guess coming from StarCraft and coming from Dota, like, there were maps banned, there were heroes banned. Like, that was part of
Well,
the
it's like-
game. So I'm like,
It's like a weakness, right? And what is comp? The comp is like exploiting the enemy team's weakness. So it's like if your hero pool is a weakness, then that's fair game to exploit technically. But like I said, that's a whole other can of worms. So I know we could go on, and I would personally love to go on, but again, as a podcast host, it's my duty to move on in case other people are like, "What the fuck, man? 2 hours on hero bans." So now I want to shift over to a topic that I think Andy will. Well, I'd like Andy to take the lead basically, because we've talking about modes that could come in Domination, etc., etc. What about the workshop? This huge asset that we've kind of been given, and it's kind of produced. To be honest, in the last how long has it been? Like over a year, 2 years maybe since the workshop came out. It's produced like the most content for us, I think, basically way more than we've been given per se. So Andy,
the crazy thing with that is that's I think right now on the workshop there's one developer at Blizzard. There's one guy working on it, and for the past year or so, it's been maybe max of 3. Obviously, like it's QA and all the other sort of stuff that goes into making a game, but the actual workshop developers is one person. And to think that we've gotten so much content out of just one person, when hopefully when Overwatch 2 comes out and there's a bit more developer time available, we'll see what I hope to be an explosion of content coming out of that. Because like every single game that has a modding system has way outlived its life because of it. Like TF2, I love TF2. I have like 2,000 hours in TF2. If it didn't have custom servers, modding, scripting, all that sort of stuff, I would say it'd probably be dead by now. But I mean, we're more dead than it already is, unfortunately. As much as I love TF2, it's not doing so well. But like the workshop has such a potential to not only increase the game's like player base, but just increase the stuff you can do in the game. Like, I mean, everyone knows Dota came out of, was it Warcraft? Was it
Warcraft 3?
Yeah.
Warcraft 3? Yeah, I actually didn't play Warcraft 3, so I don't know much about it. But I know that Dota was like a mod that came out of Warcraft.
Well, even auto chess.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Came out
auto
of
chess.
Dota.
Yeah,
Tower
like
defense.
it's layers on layers of modding, And like I was saying earlier with Conquest, if we had a map editor, we could absolutely make that into a real functional game mode. Like there's some really, really intelligent people that work in the workshop, as in like the actual people who make workshop game modes. I don't consider myself one of those. I just make funny memes and do things for Torbjorn. But there's some people that have done really amazing things. And I think if there was just a little bit more developer time spent in the workshop from Blizzard, and of course they're working on Overwatch 2. We all know that the game itself outside the workshop has kind of been, there's less updates, there's less balancing, all that sort of stuff. If we had more developers in that, I think you would see, like I said, just a huge explosion in like these balancing talks. We would be able to, instead of just talking about it, we could go and actually make those changes ourselves and test them out. And I think part of that comes into the custom games browser right now sucks ass. It's really bad. Like it's super hard to actually get a game that isn't just, Widow, Headshot, FFA or something like that going on. Yeah, like you can't do a game mode that's actually organized in any way in the game browser. And I think that just requires like UI changes, like changing how people queue into these game modes. But yeah, no, I could talk forever at the workshop. I think there's a huge potential for it. As regards to the map editor, like it's one of those things where I'm just like, there's no way that Blizzard isn't going to add a map editor. It's just a matter of when, and I think that when is probably going to be a while after Overwatch 2. Yeah.
I just want to quickly explain for anyone who's watching who doesn't know exactly what we're talking about. So we currently have the workshop, which gives you guys, the awesome workshop content creators, it gives you some room to play with. But basically, a map editor it gives you all the tools that every single thing, like a little, you can get the little lamp box in Paris, or like you can get the car and you can place it everywhere. You can literally change almost everything about the game. That is what other games have had in the past, and that's where incredible amounts of content has come from the past, as we cited with Warcraft 3. To be honest, half the most popular games in the world right now all came from someone modding something.
Yep.
Counter-Strike, a mod of Half-Life. The MOBA format was a mod from Warcraft 3. Like things like tower defense that you get on your iPads or whatever, they're all from Warcraft 3 as well. So what Andy essentially is talking about is a map editor would allow content creators to go like 10 times further than they already have done. And there's so much more to talk about. Let's talk first about the current modes that exist in the workshop. And you said you really hate the game browser, because it's not a very easy way of finding games. Does anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, it's really good for finding certain games. Like if you want to find like an FFA mode, it's fine. If you want to do just a quick 1v1 or a FFA, it's easy. But if you want to find like a team-based mode, it's almost impossible. Like it just doesn't encourage team-based interactions at all. People just want to jump in, play something silly, and that's it. Whereas you do have like scrim and poke servers on, say, Counter-Strike or something like that, where people can just jump in from the game browser, like the equivalent of the game browser. And really, like I said, that's just a matter of the developer time being available from Overwatch 2 being finished.
Yeah, so now I'll let anyone else chime in. Guys, do you have any thoughts on sort of the workshop?
I've also played around with the workshop quite a lot, and I have nothing but praise for Andy and also ELO Hell, who have done so much with it. Like you guys do game jams for like workshop modes, which is crazy. And it's also good. And I've always kind of wished that Blizzard had just advertised the workshop a little bit more. But now I feel kind of guilty saying that, knowing there's only one person working on it. But I think it would be really cool to take some game modes and put them into like the arcade and stuff. Maybe we could try out the domination mode we were talking about earlier. I'm sure there's a bunch of other team deathmatch modes we could see as well. And I think that would be really fun. That would definitely really help. So hopefully we'll get something with that with
We're just
Overwatch 2.
we're just in a limbo right now where we're waiting
Yeah.
for Overwatch 2. And that's
Yeah.
everything in the game, really. It's not just Workshop.
Mm.
So I'm like, yeah, I'm really excited for Workshop, but I also know that I have to wait until whenever Overwatch 2 comes out, within this decade, hopefully.
I'm excited.
Oh, go ahead, Freedo.
I'm excited for the potential because, of course, playing Blizzard games for years, like I was growing up with this on computer games, and the immense flexibility. I think, based on what you've said, the reason why the personality of the community interacts with customs the way they do is because for most people, I think quick play or ranked is like enough of Overwatch, and then they play the queuing game modes, like Tiny Overwatch or whatever. Like it's great for that. I feel like that's the biggest percentage of interest in the workshop is while you wait. Whereas in StarCraft or Warcraft, the base game was so challenging that there wasn't really a casual option, and so that's how you got to, or maybe in Warcraft, like Dota is a competitive variant that changed the rule set and everything to give you a different experience. But largely, a lot of those custom games that were really popular back in the day when I was a kid playing those were the casual versions of online games that the game didn't naturally have. So when you already have quick play and mystery heroes and stuff, I just think that's how the community's responded thus far. I am excited though for like if the workshop gets to use some of the PvP stuff, that could be like if there was a way for them to like enable that, and then maybe all of a sudden some creator's mission is like a playable thing that you can grind with the PvP stuff. I feel like the sky's the limit with that. Like I think I can see that working. PvE, that's what I meant to say. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I want to quickly add to that before I let Fitzy talk. Sorry, Fitzy, I kept you at bay. Is just that I wonder if it's just a rumination, but back when we were modding in Warcraft 3, the scope of games in general was smaller, and like being able to mod off Warcraft 3 allowed you to create games that you couldn't otherwise see. Whereas I feel like right now, a lot of one of the things that might be not getting people to play these other modes is that they're all kind of recreations of an existing game. Like, you know,
Yeah.
they're like Among Us in Overwatch. It's like, well, I could just go play Among Us, or you know,
Yeah,
like this game in the workshop.
no, I totally agree. I think like people have way higher standards now, whereas say you're playing an Age of Empire. For me, I played Age of Empires 2 a bunch and playing like custom maps for that. I mean, they were pretty terrible looking back, but because you had no better alternative, they were amazing. So yeah, no, I totally agree. I think like people's standards are way higher, and you need to. That's where like Frieda's saying, if you have those assets, like if you have more cool stuff to add to the workshop, because right now the workshop is pretty limited. Like you'd be surprised at the things that you can't do
Yeah.
in the workshop. Like sometimes people are like, "Oh, hey, can you change like Junkrat's grenade to be slightly bigger or something like that?" You're like, "Nope, I absolutely cannot do that. That's completely impossible." But oh, can you change it so Junkrat can fly through the map and do all this other stuff? It's like, yeah, that's totally fine. So it's like if we had the ability to make way more changes and add in assets from the PvE, that sort of stuff, you would see way more interesting modes. But right now, because we're kind of limited, you just sort of have Among Us and Overwatch or Tiny Overwatch, that sort of stuff. So it is kind of just like, again, just going back to, we just need more developers on the workshop. That's basically it, And from there, it'll like no, I don't think anyone could ever say this workshop won't be a success, because it already kind of is with one developer. When it gets more, I just see it exploding.
Fitzy, go.
So I was just gonna say I've played a lot of custom games back in like Brood War and StarCraft 2 and Age of Empires, Age of Mythology. All of those had the map editors, had the custom games, cat and mouse, and
Yep.
blah blah blah.
Hello, Killy.
So
Hello,
yeah,
Kitty.
having a map editor is that is like the biggest thing. As someone who I don't know how to create stuff, like that's beyond my knowledge. I haven't really tried ever, but I know that like if you were able to make a custom map, even just having like the flat level, I played what was that, like Black Hole or whatever, and like there was more that you could do with just like the fact that they gave us an open map to work with. And so yeah, being able to like, oh, okay, you can make a wall there, you can make a wall there, then you can like make a maze game, and like there's like that was just top thing in my head. But there's so many things that you could do with just like a map editor. So I'm really excited if it ever happens. I hope it is soon.
It will for sure. Like,
But yeah, I wonder if the assets. So how you're saying you could move different assets of the game, or like, but like how. The question is, how did they make the maps? Because like, are they all handmade? Very, they're very different. It's not like maybe they're like, okay, we'll chuck this phone booth and put it on another map.
well, as
Maybe
somebody who is currently Torbjorn, I can tell you that you can swap the assets in, and like there's a lot. It's, say like that phone booth on Kings Road. That's not like tied to the map. It is an asset that you can just pull and put somewhere. Obviously, to make a system for someone to do that easily, both on PC and console, which is also something to consider. Like you need to make it accessible for console. Hopefully, hopefully the Switch doesn't limit Workshop. I'd hate that so much if we couldn't get cool Workshop content because players on the Switch like literally can't run it. But yeah, no, you can absolutely just drop assets in and out. But making a system to do that is the issue.
right, and that's where it's like we have the maps that randomly stuff will fall through the map because it's not solid. It's like a very specifically designed thing, clearly not specific enough, that they like kind of put there. Like if you I don't know if you guys, well, I don't know, we don't go too into it, but like the second point of Volskaya, the back thing, you can walk up one side of them but
Oh
not the
yeah.
other side. But on the other side, it's the opposite side. Anyways, there's that like little ledge on top. You can't get to it. I wish you could, because you could walk up the one side but not the other side. Anyways, I'm just kind of rambling on different assets. But yeah, map editor, cool. I think it opened up like I can't say anything that you've already said. So
Niandra, you kind of made your own workshop modes, right? Like,
Yeah. I've only done like very simple stuff. But yeah, I would love a map editor. You guys were using like StarCraft for an example, I think. Have you guys ever played like Gary's mod? Because that also, is basically like a sandbox game where people can code stuff for it and they make their own stuff. And the idea of like Overwatch becoming that, it would be like, I think that'd be insanely good. It would definitely help with like the lifespan. Yeah, because I think Gary's mod came out in like 2004 and is still going. So yeah.
Yeah, I've
hopefully-
never
I never played
personally,
it, no.
but I know of it. I know it's
Yeah.
cool. I think one thing personally coming to my mind in terms of the addressing the custom browser issue, I think the simplest way is that when in a different game, when you're looking at the custom browser, it's very easy to identify what game it is that you're looking for and that you're trying to play. Whereas right now it's
Oh,
just like a
right,
wall
yeah.
of text, right? It's just like
Yeah.
you have
The
to
lobby
only
name.
the title will give you any clue as to what you're signing up for, basically, unless you want to bother to click on everyone and read the the what changes are on in this small text on the right. I'd quite like to see, like, again, in like Warcraft and Starcraft custom mods, you can see like a little preview of the map, and that is usually good enough because it's like a thumbnail that they'll make. So it's like, if you want to play battle tanks, you'll just see the little battle tanks thumbnail that their content creators will like give out, and then there's like a version number, right? So you know if it's the most up-to-date version. I think a simple solution, I don't know, maybe this is dumb, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a simple solution would be to allow us to see stuff like that, where it's like you can add like a little thumbnail or something that comes with that you can code into the workshop code. That's like, this is what you're going to play if you sign up. Because I think one of the problems a lot of people have is just like sifting through all the crap just to find what they're looking for, right?
Do
Yeah.
you want a penis in the game? Because that's how you get a penis in the game.
Yeah, that's what I was
It's
thinking.
exactly what I was gonna say. Like,
Everyone
might
went to
forget-
penis in the game?
well, that's what happened back in the day, where when you had those tools, debaucherous stuff that you wouldn't want a child to see definitely comes out.
I
So
suppose you could have
I
like
mean,
It's
a...
rated T.
yeah,
You could have
that's
like a
exactly why
limited...
they
You could have a
restrict it.
limited range of things, right? Like you could, theoretically, if you wanted, you could restrict them in certain things to the thumbnail.
Right. Well, that's why in Overwatch, player icons and sprays, they're all brand approved, right? Like in other games, you can. I think is it. I can't remember in CS:GO.
Into Counter-Strike, you could.
Yeah, I mean, you could
Counter-Strike
literally spray porn
Yeah.
on walls and stuff.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
God,
Like,
my
so that's the difference
flashbacks
between
from...
a mature Valve game versus Blizzard, who wants for all ages appropriate. So
And I think Blizzard cares a lot about their image when it comes to Overwatch. They do not
And they-
want that image associated with the game.
to defend them, they have to as well at the same time, because anytime they make the slightest bit of thing, there's 10 articles about how they are this evil corporation, whereas Valve is just like, do what you want, like we don't care. So it's almost like because they care, they have to care more. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Anyway, my favorite point that's been brought up here is just the nature of the gaming industry compared to us, old gamers who didn't have smartphones, right? Like I think a lot of teenagers right now don't remember what gaming was, or didn't live through gaming before smartphones were a thing. And everything was just so much more limited. And whereas now, every game is ported onto everything. There's just, you open your phone and there's millions of games. Like that's the availability of that. And it's interesting how there was like that golden era of modding on PC that brought us all these things that it almost just isn't required as much anymore, because there's just games everywhere. Whereas back then it was like a couple consoles, and PCs had to be specifically built to handle games, and it wasn't like a ubiquitous thing that everybody had. The market was much smaller.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think
And only
like,
nerds
yeah,
did it as well. It was a very nerdy thing to game back then. Like now, everyone games, like basically in the country, in America at least. Back then, it was like you were a nerd pretty much, and I loved being a nerd, but I just it was a different crowd.
No, yeah. Yeah, I mean, just the scope of gaming is so much larger. Like, as I was alluding to initially, is that, yeah, it's like, in a way, it's almost an outdated necessity. Like, back then you needed, and also you could just, games weren't always free to play either, so you had to pay for games. So you couldn't afford to drop 30 quid on every new game that came out. So if you only had Warcraft 3, of course you wanted to play Counter-Strike on Warcraft 3 or whatever, you wanted to make a new game inside Warcraft 3 because you couldn't afford 5 other games. But now, like, most games are free to play, so you can just download anything you want all the time. There's so many more games, so you can just, like, why would you need a really finicky awkward little mini game in a game when you could just play this really
Play a whole
polished,
nother one.
yeah, like a really
Yeah.
polished thing by a whole new developer.
That's where the workshop is kind of in an awkward situation right now, where it is that finicky awkwardness. Whereas if you could add more polish yourself as a workshop creator, I think people would enjoy it more. But
Yeah.
like you said, it's so finicky now. Like you're looking at 128 spheres that are kind of semi-transparent, and like, oh yeah, if I shoot that thing on the wall, that'll open a menu, and it's really
Yeah,
awkward
yeah.
to interact with right now. But like I keep on saying, hopefully that changes.
I always wondered if maybe like the lack of polish was why Blizzard didn't advertise the workshop as much as they could in like the custom in the arcade and stuff. You know, because obviously like the HUD features for custom games in the workshop are like very simple
Mhm.
and often end up quite ugly and stuff. And Blizzard's always been like very pro polish and stuff.
Yeah, I'd say that's a huge part of it. Like honestly, most workshop modes look like ass.
They
Like,
do.
they really don't look that great. Like once you get used to that look of workshop modes, you kind of just forget about it. But I can see from a new player who joins in and they look at the custom games browser and they're like, "Oh, cool, this new mode," and it's like, "Oh, it's just a bunch of white spheres." Okay,
20
what the
text
hell is
boxes.
this? Yeah,
Yeah, I remember queuing up into like Harry Potter, and there was like
Oh yeah.
like a separate menu that you had to find to get all the spells, and the spells were so
Yeah.
awkward and hard to pull off, and I was like, why
The
am I
key
doing this?
combos.
Why am I
Yeah.
torturing myself to press like 14 odd interactions that will disappear once I start pressing them, so I can't even remember what they were, just to do this like one little Harry Potter gimmick where my mercy shoots a little green beam that I'll
Yeah.
probably miss because I'm so busy doing all it's just, yeah, it's
I will say Quidditch is in the workshop and it's amazing. Go play it. It's good.
Okay.
okay. I will trust your word on this one, Andy. I mean, how would you like to see the, forget for a second that, you know, we know there's just one literal dev. Shout out to, what's the dev's name, do you know? Sorry.
Zach Metcalf. He's the most passionate guy I've ever seen.
Aw.
Like he interacts with the community so much, like the workshop community, like the workshop creators.
Mhm.
He has something like 15,000 messages on the workshop Discord, just responding to people, like giving them help on the scripts and all that sort of stuff. Like that guy, yeah, I could sing his praise forever, but he's fucking amazing, you know.
Shout out
Yeah,
to
sorry,
you, my
what's
friend.
the question? Yeah, shout out.
No, I was
to
just gonna
Zach.
say, like, shout out to you. Like, I think we should do a better job of giving credit where credit is due. And shout out to you, Zach. Like, thank you so much for the awesome resource, for being such a passionate individual as well. And chat, and anyone watching this on YouTube later in the future time, please, like, let your appreciation be known. Like, you know, I don't know, spam Blizzard forums, be like, thank you, Zach, love Zach. Let's say there wasn't just Zach working on this.
Mhm.
How would you like the workshop to be better featured, at least? You know, forget that we can't get a map editor for now. Do you want to
Yeah.
see them like a workshop spotlight? You know, like they do content creator spotlights. Do you want to see them? Do you
Yeah.
want to see them put them on the arcade?
Yeah, no, I'd love if just like say once every week there's like a rotating workshop mode. That would be enough to get people used to what the workshop is, and then they'll dive in a bit more and see like what is this thing. Then like the discoverability of the workshop modes right now is really bad. It's really hard to find new interesting ones. Like things like Quidditch can exist and just be there on the internet, but nobody really knows about it. If there was more of an ecosystem around that whole thing, it would just benefit everyone in that people play the modes more, therefore people make more modes, therefore the workshop gets more of a player base and Blizzard sees more interest in it and develops more things. But yeah, like I think just adding an arcade thing, like we have Hero Gauntlet, which is like a Blizzard official workshop mode. But if we could feature more community made ones, that'd be amazing.
I think it needs this like a Reddit like system. I think
Yeah.
Super Mario Maker has something like this. It works on a console, obviously, so it might fit this purposes. But like, I think you need creator profiles that track like all these things, right? Like first of all, give you credit for making the thing instead of it just being a code that's like separate, right? In Mario Maker,
Mhm.
like people can develop social
reputation.
Oh well,
right.
that's a huge thing. It's like who can I ask anyone here who made Tiny Overwatch? Who did that? Like the original Tiny Overwatch, where you're just in the room on Hollywood. Nobody knows who made that, and like we've tried looking to find out who made that originally, but nobody knows, and that's a shame because like okay, Tiny Overwatch is kind of simple, but like there's
It's
other modes
amazing.
that kind of yeah, it's really fun to play, but it's pretty
It
simple.
might be the best workshop mode, or the most successful, maybe. Anyway,
know,
I can
I
see
know-
you. I see you've been hanging out with Samito enough, Freedo.
I don't like playing it that much, but I see why people like it, right?
But yeah, it is a shame, and I totally agree that a system that rewards or like shows the people behind making the modes would be great. I mean, speaking as a very biased person in that case, but I think yeah, a Reddit-like system or like some way to vote on modes so that they're surfaced, maybe
Yeah.
not just by Blizzard selecting them would be great.
It also helps the consumer, though, is the reason, is because you can you can put tags on it to describe what type of mode it is, right? Like you can look at the same creator and look at all the maps, the Mario maps he made. I don't even like Mario Maker actually, but not to go on a separate rant, but like I don't like that game, but the system they did for curating their user generated content, I think that's kind of what you're asking for, and that would be the ticket. I think like it would have to be tied to your profile, and you'd have to be able to like search through it and navigate, and then have people vote on it, right? So like then better stuff would rise to the top, and you don't have to have good branding like Tiny Overwatch or something, and like if you feel Quidditch is good, then maybe like Quidditch can pick up some steam because people can actually see it and have information when they hover over it of like, oh, this is got good ratings and blah blah blah, right? It's made by this guy who's a famous creator, and it would make the whole experience a lot better. There's a lot they can do with that if they try to emulate that system.
There's actually workshop.codes, which is a website. That's basically what you've described there. Is that whole system, but just on a website. Like if they were to implement that, that would be huge, because kind of what you're describing of the modes bubbling to the top happens on workshop.codes, but it's way smaller because obviously not everyone knows that even exists. Not everyone, speaks English. Like, there's Korean websites for the same thing, there's Chinese websites. It's kind of harder to have like one community for that sort of thing.
I've heard that there's a really, really big, I think, Chinese community for the workshop that we just miss out on because of the lack of accessibility and language barrier and stuff. I think wasn't the Among Us mode?
They make such cool modes. I've seen so many of them. I've looked at them, and they do so much with the like weird limited spheres that we have. They make like I saw one, Attack on Titan, where it's like this gigantic Titan.
There's like a pirate ship.
Spheres. Yeah, there's a pirate ship. There's a like AC-130 mode where you're a bastion with like a plane made around you out of grapple beams. Like there's so much cool stuff, and we miss out on it because it's really hard to find. Like it's super hard to find that kind of stuff.
Fitzy, how do you feel about all this is being said? Do you have anything to add? I know
I mean, nothing that I haven't already said. I'm looking forward.
Sorry, I didn't want you to just be left out
good.
if you want to have any thoughts.
I've played lots of modes. I've played Warcraft, or not Warcraft. Anyways.
Starcraft. Yeah. I think one thing I want to add to this.
So.
One thing I want to add to this, and it's kind of a little bit negative, is one thing that Blizzard has to receive criticism for, and maybe Activision, is that they recently updated how any content created within their games is treated in terms of intellectual property. So basically, who owns it? And this came with Warcraft 3, the Reforged version, where they basically put out a statement that was like, anything that's made in a Blizzard game is now Blizzard property. And basically, this is to explain to anyone who isn't familiar with. Like we were saying earlier, the most popular game in the world probably is MOBA, the most popular genre, alongside perhaps FPS. Came from Warcraft 3, Blizzard's game, turned into Dota, turned into League of Legends, and Blizzard missed out on a huge opportunity. They went and released Heroes of the Storm, but nobody gave a fuck, and they basically missed out on a bunch of bucks. So in classic overreaction, they've kind of now gone and said, well, everything you make, it belongs to us now, which actively kind of disincentivizes people from trying all the hard work that Andy you're alluding to, which is like people could spend hundreds and hundreds of hours making a cool game mode, and if Blizzard want to take it, they can. And I think that's something that we have to highlight and kind of point a finger and say that's not really right. That's just not fair to the content creators who are putting in the time. I mean, I understand why they've done it, and it makes a complete business sense. It also feels rather unfair and disincentivizes making content. I don't know if you have any.
I'm curious how other games do that. Like, how does Valve deal with mods made out of their game that are making profit somehow? Do they end up taking? No, they don't take like intellectual property rights or anything, do they? Or
I mean, think about I mean, there was what? It was Auto Chess, which then League made its own thing, and then Hearthstone made Battlegrounds.
Mm.
So
Even Dota has their
Yeah.
own
and the reverse switched them
version,
up.
right?
There's
I
actually
mean, Dota. It came from Dota though. It was in Dota. It was called Auto Chess, and then I mean, I'm assuming that was the original version.
No, I mean,
yes, you are right.
there's like
So
a Dota Battlers right now, right? Is there like an official branded one? Anyways, carry on.
yes, both those things are true. I think the problem is with discussing this is that there actually isn't that many examples of like a game going off and being massive that a company should have been able to own. So in some ways, I do sympathize with Blizzard because like they should have been able to own the MOBA genre in a way. But I mean, there's a lot to that story that's very interesting. I would try not to be too long-winded, but they were too busy with World of Warcraft succeeding beyond their wildest expectations to like worry about a competitive style mode. Like it was just not even on anybody's radar for a while. So they kind of lost the momentum of it, and then the competitors came and somewhat stole it. There's a lawsuit, blah blah blah. So I don't blame them, but there actually isn't that many examples of other companies like allowing mods and then the mods being massive, other than Valve. But Valve makes so much money doing other things that they just sort of don't care. Like Steam is too profitable for them to care about one game, you know? Like whereas that means more to Blizzard, and there just isn't really mod communities anymore in any game, really, because of the things we've already said earlier about how like I mean, the phone making game community is where it's at with that kind of stuff. So, I don't mind it based on like the nature of things. I just think they really need the incentive structure in place with like recognition and discoverability for both the consumer and the creator, and because really it to me it never was I make this thing and then I have an IP that I make another game with and then it makes lots of money. That's happened like twice in history. What really creators are incentivized by is getting their name out there. That's the thing. You get hired because you made a thing, or I can put my name to this. Like the creator of Tiny Overwatch might put that on a resume, right? Or whatever for an actual job. Like I see that. I could be wrong. I'm not a dev, so speaking out of no experience at all. But from what I can tell, that's the actual like tangible value that mod creators get most of the time. It isn't like making a new game with that IP. That like to be honest, like the same struggles we're saying about the workshop being successful is why that's not even. I don't even think that's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like I don't think there's a workshop mode that you could transport out and all of a sudden make this insane game. Most of the time it's them emulating other games because you already can make any kind of indie-ish game on the phone or on the Switch or whatever. Like we have that in abundance. So it being, you see what I'm trying to say? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
get you.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear Andy's stuff because I'm kind of ignorant as fuck, so I'm just going off what I think.
To be fair to Blizzard's credit, like they're not, they didn't completely take away everything. Like you can still in that same custom game license thing or whatever it's custom game agreement, you can still take donations. You can still make some amount of money and like profit directly off of a custom game mode. It's just at the end of the day, the intellectual property rights or whatever. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really understand most of it. Still go to Blizzard. So there are still ways, and like you said, Fredo, if there are ways in game to sort of promote your brand or your name or whatever, there's existing things like Patreon, and if you have like a YouTube channel or something like that to promote your modes outside of the game, you can still make something out of it. And I totally agree in saying like, how many examples are there of an entire genre of games being made? There really aren't that many. So like I think I'm a huge guy for open source stuff. I think information should be shared freely and everything like that. People shouldn't make it hard for others to learn or benefit from their own work. But that being said, I don't know that like Blizzard owns your custom game mode, but they don't own like the concept of a MOBA or something like that. So I don't know. I'm kind of 50-50 on it. I think it kind of sucks, but it's also I don't think it's actually going to matter that much in the end.
That's
I
fair.
feel if you're a dev in this position, like an aspiring dev, I should say, probably just build for mobile. Like I just don't.
Yeah,
you know what I'm
learn
saying? Like,
Unity. Like you learn Unity or Unreal Engine or something like that. Like I mean, Overwatch is great. I love the workshop because it's a great way for like kids to get into programming. I think a kid sees like, oh, tiny Overwatch, how does that work? And then they kind of learn like, oh, that's how that works. That's basics to game programming. That's really cool. I think that's a really nice thing for something to come out of Overwatch, someone to start their career into game development. But really, if you actually want to make something to make money and like build a career out of, like just go learn the actual tools for that.
Again, it was different in the early 2000s when the game software itself was the platform. So if you wanted to play tower defense, you didn't have a smartphone to do it. You had to play StarCraft. So that's different.
And also, if you wanted to make a game engine, like there was nothing like Unity. There was no easy way to do that. You had to make an entire game engine yourself, or you modded on top of an existing game engine or game. So it's kind of the same thing we're saying. It's like stuff has moved on. Like the whole modding scene in general has just moved on from what it was, the 2000s or whenever we were, playing our Age of Empires and Warcraft 3.
Yeah, and this is why I like having people more informed than me on the podcast, because then it gives me, better information. So I mean, it's not basically it's not as bad as it sounds, because it's not as bad for a dev. So that's a relief. I'm glad that it's not as shitty as it sounded to me when I read that and when the initial response to the things came. So that's good. Now we're kind of I'm running on. I don't want to take too much of you guys' time, so I want to quickly get a nod to something else that we haven't discussed. Since we've been speaking of modes, we haven't spoken.
There. Just I'm not a lawyer, so I might be totally wrong on saying, oh, maybe Blizzard owns everything. Maybe I'll get a knock on my door and say, sorry, we gotta take your PC. We own everything on your PC now. But I just want to get that out there. Don't listen to me for legal. If you're actually making a game mode in the workshop, don't listen to me when it comes to the legality of it or who owns it.
Sure.
But yeah,
I guess the fundamental point was that you probably care more about the recognition than the physical IP itself, I suppose. So no, and I'll come back to you at the end as well, Andy, to plug more workshop stuff, because you really deserve it. But PvE modes, we haven't spoken, because we're currently within one right now, Junkenstein, for the 4th year now. Yay. How do we feel about PvE? Is like our last kind of major topic. Are we excited? Do we like it? Do we need more or less? What's going on?
Depends on Overwatch 2 and how they handle it. I'm expecting it to be like Diablo esque, I guess, or like a bit of World of Warcraft, those types of systems of endless replayability. So, what is this question in relation to the workshop? I'm a little confused.
No, just
like
generally,
PvE
how, because Overwatch 2 is kind of promising that PvE will be a more central part of it. Right now, PvE is like a seasonal thing that comes and goes. There's a lot of sort of topics we could go. I'm just curious if you guys have any immediate thoughts, because there's one argument of like, should PvE content always be available because it's seasonal right now and you can't play Junkenstein whenever you want? Should it always be available? And also, with the future Overwatch, are we going more PvE?
Well, the new game is for sure, but I think the current PvE stuff we have, it's fine for it to be seasonal, whatever. It's really small. It would make no difference really if they kept it or didn't. Like some people would play it. It probably is. I think Blizzard's right in limiting it due to the limited nature of the modes. But I am excited for Overwatch 2's PvE because I think it could be like Borderlands-esque successful, like the game that you can play with friends and it's just like incredibly approachable. The universe is already so likable as it is. My expectations for Overwatch 2 is that it'll be maybe like at least half as hype as Overwatch 1, but potentially higher because there's just way more players that want to tap into a game like that rather than a competitive game, which Overwatch PvP is. So I think it's potentially really good or good. I don't see a downside, basically, is my point.
Fitzy, I imagine had your chance to try some of the PvE.
Yeah, I mean it was one mission, but and there were some items you could pick up and stuff that did stuff. So going kind of segueing both topics of the workshop and stuff, if they add those things to be able to do in the workshop, you're getting more and more into like still a cooler game mode thing that you could do, almost a battle royale in Overwatch. Ooh, because we don't have enough of those. But then you could even get into like Dota-esque type stuff where you grab an item and now your damage does 10% more or whatever it is. I don't know. Anyways, the mode itself, I'm not a huge PvE person, but I think it'll be cool. They'll have lore stuff hopefully, and it'll be. I think again the seasonal stuff is fine. It's kind of like you don't go to Overwatch to play a PvE thing, so it's just another part of the game that's like a little bonus. It's not like it's not the what the players are really there for type of thing, but it's going to be a completely different type of player base for Overwatch 2. So
that's one area where relating it back to the workshop, where I think the workshop and the modding could actually be very relevant, is creating PvE content, like unofficial PvE content that potentially has the potential to like give us more devs or more storylines they might want to pursue. Because I remember again in Warcraft 3 there was like whole custom campaigns that people had made that became really popular, and people were like, this is really great. And I think even there was like an unofficial bonus campaign you could download with the hero Rexar that Warcraft 3 put out, that eventually went on to became like this real fan favorite character. He's now a playable character in Hearthstone as one of your heroes. In fact, I think he's the default hunter. So I think that could be very cool if content creators can make PvE content and give their own storyline to, let's say, Zenyatta, right? Like we know very little about Zenyatta other than whatever like the minor details we've been told. So it could be cool to have like a PvE campaign where you get to learn a bit about Zenyatta's backstory, that whatever one person created, it's like, this is what Zenyatta did. This is Zenyatta's origin story, and you play through certain missions, and then later that could be like a source of finding a new story developer. It's like, hey, this person made a great campaign. Like they could be a cool source.
I do believe StarCraft 2 has done quite a bit in this realm. I would say I don't think Blizzard would do that for what you specifically said, but things like that, like they're very precious about the lore and they're very protective on that kind of stuff. So that specific example I don't think would work for Overwatch, but definitely other versions of that. Like like they probably would designate it as non-canon. Do you know what I mean? Like they're very.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't expect them to be like, yes, this is true, but I would expect them to potentially be like, this person's really great. Like, let's incorporate them or something that they did. Niandra, do you have any thoughts on sort of PvE in general and not just my random segue?
I think with the Overwatch 2, I'm just kind of hoping it has enough depth that, maybe it'll attract like speedrunners and stuff. I think that would be very neat. With the workshop, one thing you've got to keep in mind is that no matter what you do with it, you're always limited to 12 players or 12 dummy bots. So if we could go beyond that and do custom game modes with more than 12 characters at once, I think that would open up like so much in regards to like, our own PvE stuff, PR, as like Fitzy said, just like a lot there. I'd love to see that if possible.
To increase the lobby size, basically.
Yeah.
And that could help with most like domination as well, potentially. Going back full circle is to have like 20 people, 30 people, whatever. Okay, in that case, then let's head to our concluding thoughts. Like I said, I've taken you guys time enough, so I think, as I always leave it, it seems inevitable. Always, I'm like, Overwatch 2 will come out soon. We hope. TM. What do we hope for? But that's gonna be my question, basically, with regards to maps and modes. And you can touch on anything that we've spoken about. Could be bans, could be map formats, could be push, could be a new mode, could be workshop. What is kind of the one thing you're either excited for or really want Blizzard to push for in the coming months or with the release of Overwatch 2 with relation to map and mode? And I'll take it to Andy first because I think Andy may have the most ready-made answer.
Yeah, I mean, like more workshop development time. That's pretty much what I'm always going for. That's what my yeah, just anything to do with workshop, more of it. Basically that. And then like Freedo said, if you can get an in-game system to promote it a bit more, but I think that's way longer term. Just going by how the pace of development at the moment, it's a long-term solution. But for now, just more workshop stuff would be great.
That's fair. Niandra?
Yeah,
I'm gonna go
same.
clockwise.
I think just workshop stuff, a map editor, and then I guess just more information inside the game itself. How we originally started talking about like a more in-depth F1 menu, the creator system, just stuff like that, I think.
Totally fair. Freedo?
I think you asked this the last time I was on, and I'm going to give the same answer, I'm pretty sure. So I'll say it quick for fans who've watched both shows. But I'm most excited for Overwatch 2 to expand the casual aspects of the game so that the hardcore aspects can double down, right? And we can get everything we've talked about: stats, tournament modes, ranked being more rank-y, more hardcore. So that's what I want. I want great casual stuff, so that it's not like, because right now it feels like a lot of decisions are tethered to like the casual player base we have, where a lot of them and a lot more new people will be in this whole another revenue stream and avenue, so that we can treat us sweaty tryhards in a different group.
Yeah, that's fair. Fitzy?
Hero bands. I mean, yeah, that is like a major thing I want, but I like new heroes, so I'm looking forward to some new heroes. That'll be fun, especially if there's
Yeah.
like 5 supposed to be released at launch or something.
Yeah,
Something
I'm
like that. It's like it's the multiple. We've never had a multiple hero release, so that'll be interesting.
I
That's
can
true.
only hope that there's a Finnish hero. I so want the Finnish accent in game. Like I want everyone to hear the glorious accent that is the Finnish accent from a hero. So yeah.
And, yeah, and more Irish heroes maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think Moira is our one hero. We're probably not going to get more than that, so
No,
might as well just be happy with that.
maybe Welsh or Scottish. I don't know. We'll get
Ooh.
some more Great Britain representation. No, I'm kind of with Fitzy on this one. I think if I had to pick, I might go with hero bands. I'm also kind of interested in that right now we've reached this very halcyon stage of Overwatch where like everybody who hates it has left, and the rest of us are all like, we're quite happy with the game right now. It feels like a good state of balance, because now, like you said, when 5 heroes drop, I think that's all going down the toilet basically. I think we're gonna have like balance is gonna get torn up again, and we're gonna have to like go through many iterations of like, unbreak this hero please, and like don't rebalance this old hero to counter the new hero and now make them broken. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a content creator's minefield. So I think
I'm
hero
not looking
bans will
forward
help.
to that.
No, I mean either. I think it's going to be a lot of angry people.
I do not want to get on the meta merry-go-round again with what you just said. So I hope that doesn't happen. I'm optimistic that maybe new content could be more tame now. But the thing with power creep and power imbalance is like, how do you add a new character and make them interesting without making them too strong, right? It's like, it's so difficult. How do you change the dive meta without breaking the game, right? I don't know. I feel for Blizzard because they haven't been in a great position. Hero bans does help though, put it that way. So hopefully maybe both those come at the same time.
Exactly. I mean, I think the Blizzard formula usually has been release them overpowered, tune them down later. Like, it just makes sense. Why wouldn't you want everyone to play your new shiny hero? But I think underpowered, buff them later is what I would rather. But okay, thank you so much, guys, for your time. I'm super grateful. Is there anything you want to plug first, like this side of the, so Fitzy, Freedo, anything you guys want to plug? I'm gonna let Andy give a long plug for the workshop because he deserves it. But anything you want to shout out, or just yourselves if you want to.
At your Overwatch YT on Twitter. Come say hi.
Fitzy here on everything.
Go say hi to them. Niandra?
Just youtube.com/c/Niandra.
Check them out. There's also, if anyone watching live on Twitch right now, exclamation mark with one of these content creators' names will bring up their socials. And anyone watching YouTube, their socials will be below. I mean, if you know me, you know most of these guys anyway, so it's unlikely you need it. But Andy, tell us some workshop stuff that we all need to know more about.
All right. So there's the @EloHell workshops on Twitter. That's the well, EloHell everyone knows surely. They're kind of promoting smaller workshop creators, the ones that can't really promote themselves, that don't know how to. Definitely check that out. Workshop.codes is the website for workshop codes. And then, yeah, like as you were saying earlier, go spam the Blizzard forums just saying, thank you, we love you, Zach Mescalf. The one guy fighting for the workshop inside Blizzard. Go tell him how much you love him. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
Yeah, again, go show some love, guys, because we show hate, but we should show appreciation when we get something good. So all right, thank you so much, guys. I will not take any more of your time. Thank you so much, everyone who's been watching. I hope you guys had a informative experience. I certainly had a blast. And yeah, check everyone out. They're all awesome. So yes, they all deserve your likes and follows and subs and everything else. So thank you very much, guys. Peace out. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.